Hello everyone, Omni-sensei here with What If Superman Was in the MCU? Part 2. If you enjoy this content, smash the like button. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description.
Chapter 6, Breaking News. If there was one thing that S.H.I.E.L.D. took seriously, it was experiments to make enhanced soldiers. Not that there were many things that S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't take seriously, but they had a particularly strong focus when experiments that could lead to the creation of super soldiers inevitably appeared. It wasn't that hard to guess why, given S.H.I.E.L.D.'s founders' dealings with Captain America, or maybe even more relevant, their dealings with Johann Schmidt, the Red Skull. They knew, since their beginning, how dangerous a super soldier could be when fighting for the wrong side and how valuable they were when fighting on their side. So when S.H.I.E.L.D. Systems flagged a call made to the New York Police Department where the caller spoke about a lab that was making experiments on people, trying to turn them into mutants, there was a metaphorical code red alarm shrieking all over the Triskelion. The chance of this being a prank call was considered high at first, but soon after the caller gave his name and the address of the supposed lab and said he would leave his cell phone on so they could track it, there already were agents on the move. The first agents actually got there together with the cops and were fast to take control of the situation and isolate the place. Several black cars were stopped at the factory's entrance, alongside police cars and ambulances. People in suits were everywhere, taking pictures of apparently every inch of the place, while the cops who responded to the call were guarding the perimeter. That was the scene that greeted Clint Barton when he arrived and crossed the perimeter line to enter the factory. Usually, the famous Hawkeye wouldn't be called to deal with a solved situation. His abilities were normally directed at problems that needed solving before they could become unsolvable. However, the threat of a super soldier factory inside New York was reason enough for him to be called out of his bed in the middle of the night. The place looked abandoned, even if it was crawling with people at the time. Old, badly maintained, and dirty. The second room he entered, however, was worse, even if it looked newer. The place was destroyed, machines and barrels were tossed everywhere, walls were cracked, and the catwalk had fallen on top of everything. And the big steel door that apparently led to an elevator was twisted in weird angles. There was even a hole in the ground right behind it where it was possible to see parts of the floor below. He entered the elevator and went down, following the instructions of the agents already there, where he was expected by Maria Hill. "Took you long enough. It's almost morning," she greeted, without even looking at him. "Well, traffic in New York is a disaster," Clint answered. "You arrived in a helicopter," Maria pointed out. "A damn slow one, apparently. We should complain to Fury." She rolled her eyes and Clint smiled, looking around. "So, what VE we got here?" he asked. Maria approached and showed a few pictures to him on a tablet. "Mutant Factory. Are you familiar with Dr. Daniel Okamura's thesis on the possibility of artificially activating the X gene on a non-mutant?" she asked. "Wow, so much," Clint deadpanned. She didn't smile. In simple terms, they were forcing non-mutants that had the X gene to activate it, via a serum and several rounds of torture. Clint's jaw dropped slightly. Are you for Reyel? Torture? Maria sighed. Unfortunately, she began to show him the pictures. The equipment, the wounded people, a few of the medical evaluations, images of ongoing tortures. Clint had seen a lot of things in his job, but there were always some bad guys out there who managed to take it a little further on the villain scale. "Please tell me we got the guy who did this," he said. "We got some of them, Dr. Okamura and a few henchmen, but I doubt this is it. He couldn't have the money or the pull to fund something like this." "Were they successful?" "Sometimes. The serum is apparently not finished, but some of the patients responded well. A vast majority, however, couldn't handle the stress of the serum and what was needed to be done to make the serum work. We don't have the numbers yet, but a lot of people died here." "And what happened here?" Clint asked, looking at all the destruction. "The X-guys had something to do with this?" "Not according to them, no. But they did offer us their assistance and refuge to the ones who need it." The existence of the X-Men was not a secret to S.H.I.E.L.D. or the American government, but neither of them knew as much as they would like about them. Mutants existed for as long as humans did, but they only began to be recognized for what they were and get tangled up into wars and politics during World War II. In fact, people didn't actually believe in them until during the Cold War, when hard evidence was presented in the form of videos, studies, and a whole lot of witnesses. Maybe their numbers began to grow, or maybe better technology allowed more evidence to be collected, but the fact was the existence of mutants was common knowledge now. Of course, S.H.I.E.L.D. wasn't entirely relaxed about the fact that there was a group of superpowered people working mostly without their knowledge, but they were willing to let it happen for two simple reasons. They were effective and they knew how to deal with mutants. Peggy Carter, one of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s founders, had seen the value of cooperating with the man who would eventually create the X-Men, Charles Xavier. The X-Men did a very good job of protecting and teaching young mutants. They took them under their wing and helped them to control their powers so they wouldn't become a risk to people around them. It also helped that while they were there, learning to coexist, they were out of reach of other radical groups, composed by mutants or not. There was also the fact that the Avengers were a very new group. Before them, S.H.I.E.L.D. wasn't exactly prepared to deal with criminals that could kill people with their minds or control the very metal their weapons were made of. From a pragmatic point of view, it was better for S.H.I.E.L.D. that most mutants resided in a known place, kept by a known entity, where they could be taught, protected, and monitored. And from a humanitarian point of view, it was good to keep the mutants, especially the young ones, safe from bigots and terrorist mutants alike, somewhere they wouldn't need to hide what they were and what they could do. Many people seem to forget, but not everyone on S.H.I.E.L.D. or even the government was a heartless bastard. A lot of them, Clint included, would give their lives to protect an innocent person, mutant or not. So what happened then? Asked Clint. Maria pointed at someone. Clint followed her finger to see a guy sitting on a table nearby. A young guy with big, dark hair and blue eyes. Not part of S.H.I.E.L.D. or the police. Not a patient of this lab given his lack of injuries. And not one of the criminals, given that he was not cuffed. That's Clark Kent, 21, aspiring journalist, recited Agent Hill. He was the one who made the call to the police that we intercepted. According to him, he was investigating Dr. Okamura and followed him here, at which point he heard a commotion. Yelling, gunshots, things being broken. When there was no sound anymore, he risked entering to find the place like this. He thinks it might have been one of the mutants managing to escape. Clint eyed Clark for a long minute, studying his face and his gestures, trying to get a read on him. He was no Black Widow, but he had his moments. You believe him? He finally asked. He checks out. First thing I did. He arrived here, in New York, a day ago and visited a lot of newspapers trying to find a job. Just rented an apartment. And frankly, he doesn't strike me as someone who could do the things these men were doing here. She admitted, shrugging. Maybe not, but he doesn't strike me as a normal guy either. Don't know why. He is too relaxed. Well, he is here for a while now. Adrenaline burns out eventually. I'm gonna have a chat with him, Clint said, starting to walk towards Clark. His eyes did not leave Clark for 1 second as he approached, still struggling to understand the man in front of him. Something just didn't feel right. The room was full of agents running around, the lab still had all the torture equipment in it. He was just briefed by Maria Hill herself, and yet, he didn't have the appearance of a man that had just busted a mutant factory. He had a nervous expression, but not the kind of nervous a person would be in this situation. It was more like the kind of nervous a guy would have just before doing an exam in high school. Hey, Clint greeted, Clark turning to look at him. I'm Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, Clark completed, smiling and extending his hand. I know, I'm a fan. He smiled in response, shaking the guy's hand. Am I your favorite Avenger? He joked. Well, you are my second favorite. Please don't say Stark is the first. I couldn't bear the thought. Clark chuckled. No, though that armor is pretty cool. My favorite one is actually Black Widow. But not for the reasons you're thinking, he hastily added. Clint raised an eyebrow. Oh? And what reasons would I be thinking? Well, I mean, she is very. Clark stammered, then cleared his throat. She is human, and a woman, And yet she is fighting side by side with gods, the Hulk, a legendary soldier, a man with top-notch technology. I mean, if that isn't an example of hard work, determination, and pure badassery, then I don't know what is. Hey, I do that too. Why am I not your favorite Avenger? Clark smirked. Well, she is hotter. Clint actually laughed. Natasha would love this. He would have to remember to tell her. So, I know they probably asked you the same questions 1,000 times, but could you answer some for me now? He asked, sitting at the table. Sure, no problem. Maria told me you were following Dr. Kimura. Why? I've had a tip. Who gave you this tip? You know I can't tell you. If I do that, I'll lose my source. But I can tell you it's no one important. Just a two-bit criminal. He told me that the word going around was that someone was paying for any kidnapped people. He had an address, so I went there, and I've seen Dr. Okamura. So I began to follow him. Just like that. Well, he seemed to be in charge. Not sure if he was actually the boss, but he was definitely not a thug or a prisoner. Therefore, he was someone worth following. And what about that? Clint asked, pointing at the hole on the ceiling. Did you see the one who did it? No. Nothing at all? Look, the one who did that thing is strong. He or she broke concrete and destroyed a steel gate as thick as a bank's vault door. Whoever it is, people might get hurt. He kept looking at Clark, evaluating his expression. I didn't see anything, but I'm sure the one who escaped is not a bad person, Clark confirmed, meeting Clint's eyes. How can you be so sure of that? Clint demanded. Look, Mr. Barton, you arrived here just now. I didn't. When I got here, this lab was full of people. People are in pain, scared, and traumatized. I was nauseated with what I saw. And yet the one who escaped didn't kill a single kidnapper. I checked. If that doesn't prove that we are dealing with a good person, then I don't know what does. Well, it was a fair point, Clint supposed. If the one who did all this was really a mutant escaping, the fact that all those people were spared told a lot about his or her character. Even so, S.H.I.E.L.D. would have to find this mutant or at least give a call to Xavier. But there was one thing that was bothering Clint. So, Agent Hill told me you moved to New York recently, he began. Yeah, just yesterday. Where did you live before? Smallville. No, seriously, where did you live? Clark just kept looking at Clint, unamused, until he understood that Clark wasn't joking. Oh, so Smallville, huh? Must have been quite the change. A little bit, yeah, but I haven't been here for too long to feel it. But apparently you've been here long enough to have sources that give you tips about people being kidnapped. Clark stopped in his tracks and looked at Clint. Well, would you look at that, Nat? Now, who was the one who didn't know squat about interrogation? Okay, Mr. Barton, you're right, Clark admitted. I don't exactly have sources. Not yet. Anyway. Then how did you know about this place? Clark sighed. I was going back home at night after a very long day trying to find a job. And right after I had dinner, I saw a van stop in the middle of the sidewalk. A guy got out and hit a homeless person in the head. He was drunk, probably didn't even see it, and the guy started to drag him to the inside of the vehicle. I helped. How? And most importantly, why? What do you mean, why? The guy was being kidnapped. What kind of person would I be if I allowed it to happen? Well, most likely a kind of person who had a lot less chance of being shot in the head, Clint thought. But to his surprise, he actually believed the guy. The way he said it, it was like he really believed it to be unthinkable not to help someone in that situation. But how did you help him? I got close from behind and punched him. I'm not a martial artist like you, Mr. Barton, but working on a farm since childhood is better than going to the gym. He gave a little smile. After the homeless man escaped, I asked some questions to the guy, and he admitted he was kidnapping people for someone else and gave me the address. Why didn't you tell us this to begin with? Because the police usually disapproves of people hitting each other. I didn't want to be arrested. Clint stared at him seriously for a moment. That wasn't Clint Barton anymore, but Hawkeye, the agent who had killed dozens of Chitauri in the Battle of New York, the assassin who had made a career of dispatching bad people, the Avenger. Is that all you have to tell me? Are you sure you are not leaving anything out? He asked, his voice no longer nice and calm but dry and serious. Clark met his eyes without flinching. Yes, I'm sure. It was in that moment that Clint realized he was right. There was something strange about this guy. He didn't think he had anything to do with what was happening here. But he was absolutely sure that there was more than meets the eye about Clark Kent. Before he could say anything else, however, Maria Hill approached and dropped some papers on the table, looking at Clark. This is a non-disclosure agreement, she said. It basically says that you can't talk about what happened here with an outside party. I highly recommend that you sign it. Clark looked at her, a little nervous. Why? What happens if I don't sign it? He asked. We are not going to arrest you, Mr. Kent, or do anything outside the law, but this is an ongoing investigation. If you don't sign it, we will have to take legal measures to force you to sign it anyway. This is just quicker, Maria explained. He began to peruse the thick document, turning the pages too fast to actually be reading anything. But what about the people I already told? He asked. I mean, I talked to a lot of people on the phone until you guys showed up. Nobody wanted to believe me about this. We can't do anything about the people you already talked to, for obvious reasons, but at the moment you sign this, anyone you talk to will be covered by this contract, Maria clarified. So don't worry about it. We won't take any legal measures because of the past. Clark looked at her and smiled. Okay then, and without any additional word he signed. So, can I go home now? Maria looked at Clint and he nodded. You are free to go. It was a pleasure to meet you. I hope you catch whoever did this. And with this, he left. Clint's eyes didn't leave him until he entered the elevator and disappeared. That guy is weird, he stated a minute later, turning around to look at Maria. So are you, Maria answered and smiled at his fake glare. But why are you saying this? Do you think he has something to do with this? No, I don't. But there is something about him. My instincts are trying to tell me something, and I'm not getting what it is. Are you sure you're not hungry? Asked a familiar voice from behind him. Natasha told me to ask you if you have been eating well. She said you usually forget to eat when she's not here to take care of you. Clint opened a big smile and turned around to see Steve Rogers, Captain America himself, approaching without the shield, dressed in normal clothes, but still Captain America. Hey, Cap. What are you doing here? I thought you were in Washington, he said, shaking his hand. Steve greeted Maria before turning to him again. I got a call from Natasha a few hours back. She told me I would want to see something that happened here in New York. He looked around, his face losing the smile. I guess she was right. How the hell did she know about this before I did? She is out in a mission. Clint wondered, a little shocked. Captain Rogers just shrugged. I learned that it is not healthy to underestimate her, he answered, smiling once again. As I'm sure you know, she was the one Fury chose to put me up to date with the technology and the tactical training from these days. I may be a super soldier, but even I am struggling to keep up. She is not one to be trifled with. Clint snorted, thinking about poor Captain America being whipped into shape by the Black Widow. Nat had told him a few stories, but hearing from the Cap himself that she was a harsh mistress was just too damn funny. He looked back at him when he heard a tired sigh. They just don't quit, do they? Steve said, maybe more to himself than to anybody else. I guess it was really naive of me to think I would be the last person to be turned into a super soldier, wasn't it? Sometimes I wonder if all this could be avoided if the serum just didn't work on me like it did. You can't think like that, Cap. If you recall, there was already another super soldier out in the world, and he wasn't a nice guy. Without you, we would be doomed. Steve didn't answer, his eyes looking far away. Fury gave me some files about the experiments that happened while I was on ice, he said suddenly. Turns out I was just the first of many. The army tried to replicate the serum several times. And not just our army. The whole world was in a race to see who would succeed first. Eventually, the programs began to branch out. One of those programs was called Weapon X. Apparently, it was led by a man named Colonel William Stryker, and instead of trying to replicate the super soldier serum, it focused on mutants. Clint and Maria remained in silence, just listening. They tried to harvest and use the abilities of mutants, he continued, to use them as weapons. They didn't use only voluntaries, and they weren't really concerned about following anything resembling human rights. Eventually, the whole thing blew up in their faces, and the program was shut down. There weren't any arrests, though. It was all swept under the rug. Everything that happened here, probably another branch of all those programs. Steve chuckled without a trace of happiness. Cut off one head, 2 more shall take its place, he said, quoting Hydra's motto. Funny how that seems to describe every single evil organization out there. Isn't it? Clint shook his head. No, it's not funny at all, he said. No, it isn't, Steve agreed. Steve turned to Maria. Did you get the ones who did this? He asked. Like I told Barton, only a doctor and a few of his guards, she answered. But there are more out there, I'm sure of it. Probably inside our own government, Steve said, his face hard. And nothing will happen. Again, the people on top, the real guilty ones, won't be arrested. This investigation will be closed, and sooner or later, someone will dig it up and continue it. Clint could see why Natasha had sent Steve here. This was personal to him. He supposed he could understand, somewhat at least. His very identity, Captain America, was probably being used as an excuse to allow these programs to happen. And all those people died. To a nice guy like Steve, every death that happened here was felt as if it were his own fault. He and Maria would like to tell him that all this wouldn't happen, but by now they knew better. It was not only the fact that the guys who had been bribed to turn a blind eye on this had a lot of contacts everywhere, but also the value some people would find in this research, no matter how many lives it ended up costing. Hulk's very creation was proof of that, as well as the creation of the Abomination, the name the Army ended up giving to what Emil Blonsky became after the experiments with their version of the super soldier serum. And that pissed him off the same way he knew it also pissed Maria off. Because after these bastards finished playing their games, they would be the ones to clean up the mess and to collect the bodies. Ma'am, you'll want to see this. The 3 of them turned to see a young agent running in their direction, his face a mix of panic and anxiety. He handed what looked like a newspaper to Hill. What is this? She asked, as confused as Clint and Steve were. The first page, ma'am. Clint and Steve walked to Maria, each one on one side of her, trying to read the news. She let out a stream of curses, shocking the hell out of Steve. Clint would have done the same if his jaw hadn't dropped. Mutant factory discovered in New York. A workshop of horrors, read Steve, shock in his face. By Clark Kent, completed Clint, recovering his ability to talk as he saw who had written that. Son of a... Steve glared at him. Gun, he finished lamely. They became quiet for a few minutes, reading the front page headline of the New York Bulletin, printed not even an hour ago. It had the whole story of what happened here, and not only that, but also pictures of the lab, with the victims there but without identifying their faces. Pictures of the torture devices, and images of the faces of Dr. Okamura and his henchmen. And if the pictures weren't enough, there was also a list of names of every single person involved in that, either directly or simply paid not to interfere. Names of important people inside the government, the police, hospitals, famous companies, all accompanied by pictures of the documents proving everything. He wrote that here, Clint realized, without moving his eyes from the paper. Before he called us, he sat, probably on that same table he was, and wrote this thing. How did he get those names? He asked, looking at Maria. There is a notebook here full of information. We couldn't look at everything yet, but yes, these names were there, she answered, still clearly surprised to her core. Who are you talking about? Inquired Steve, confused. The guy who made the call to the police, the one who found all this. He is the same guy who wrote this, explained Clint, shaking his head. I told you there was something weird about this guy. Probably the fact that he was looking at our eyes, answering our questions. All the while this thing was being printed. He turned to Maria. Do you want me to go after him? He did sign a non-disclosure agreement. Maria gave a mirthless laugh. Yeah, he did. Right after I clarified to him that we couldn't do anything about the people to whom he had already told all this. She shook his head. He played me. Do you want me to bring him back? Asked Clint. It doesn't really matter if he signed that thing anyway. We can bring him here and stop this from spreading. That won't be easy, sir, said the agent who brought them the newspaper, looking nervous when the three of them looked at him. It's already everywhere. Not only printed copies, but on the internet as well. We could try, but the damage is already done. Maria Hill stood in silence for a second, considering what to do. She looked at Steve. Clint could almost read her thoughts. On one hand, they had been played hard by Mr. Kent, and they did not like to look like idiots. On the other hand, however, Mr. Kent had given them all the excuse they needed to pursue this to the end, no matter how powerful and high up some of the people involved were. Like Clint thought, Maria said, "No, we won't arrest Mr. Kent for an agreement he didn't break. We will, however, arrest every single one of these people. Can I count with your help, Captain Rogers?" Steve's huge smile made them forget all about being tricked by Mr. Kent. Clint was never one to take himself too seriously anyway. The sun was already out when Clark finally got back to his apartment, and, once again, there was someone already there. "So, did it work?" asked Jessica Jones, getting up from his couch. "I was beginning to think I was going to have to bail you out." Clark smiled and handed her the newspaper he had just bought. "Well, I signed a non-disclosure agreement, but they guaranteed me that they couldn't do anything about the people I had already talked to," he explained, while Jessica read the newspaper. "But we'll see if the police come barging in later." "You didn't mention me, did you?" she questioned. "No, of course not. And it's not like the guys there got a clear look from our faces or knew who we were. I told the agents that I suspected that all that happened there was a mutant escaping. The guys they arrested are probably going to think that too. Or at least think that we were mutants trying to wreck the place. We are good." Jessica smiled, and Clark was a little bit shocked when he realized that it was a true, sarcasm-free smile. But then her smile faltered a little. "I'm just pissed that we let that bitch escape," she said. "I still can't believe she got away after all that." While they were in the lab, completely focused on writing the story for the newspaper, Angel had woken up after the beating she took and ran away. Clark didn't blame Jessica. He blamed himself. If anyone should have heard her leaving, it was him. But he was too concentrated on what he was doing to pay attention, too distracted by the shock of seeing all those tortured people, and they had severely underestimated the time she would take to awake. That was the result. "We'll find her," he promised, looking at Jessica. "Did you find anything about that other guy I told you about?" She nodded and walked to her open notebook. "A little bit, but less than I'd like. Freaking guy is a ghost. Apparently he calls himself Ajax. But it's probably a fake name because I can't find any trace of him anywhere. His mother probably gave him a stupid name when he was born, and he got so traumatized that now he goes around telling people his name is the same as that dish soap." Clark sighed. "Well, he will turn up sometime. So will Angel. And we'll be there when that happens," he said, then looked at her serious. "You know, I didn't thank you for what you did. I couldn't have saved those people without your help." She just waved her hand. "Forget about it," she answered, clearly embarrassed. "No, I mean it. You didn't have to help me, or them, but you did, taking a serious risk to your own life. So thank you, and know that if you need my help, I will be there." Saying this, he yawned and stretched. "I'm so beat. I'm gonna sleep a little bit. Wake me up if S.H.I.E.L.D. shows up to arrest me. Okay? You are not gonna kick me out?" she asked, as he disappeared inside his bedroom. "You can break locks. What's the point? Good night." Jessica snorted and sat back on the couch, looking at her notebook. She still couldn't believe in the day she had. How did she go from trying to investigate her neighbor to busting a mutant factory alongside him? It was hard to realize the exact point when she decided to go with him and, more importantly, why she decided to go with him. To help him? To help those kidnapped people? to help herself? Maybe all that put together. And she did somehow accomplish all that too. For the first time since Kilgrave, she had faced her fears head-on. No hiding, no excuses, no panic attacks. She just went out there against armed men and fellow freaking strong ladies, and she helped to save a lot of innocent lives, just like her sister always told her she was capable of. All that because of him, her new neighbor, Clark Joseph Kent. Somehow he had done what Trish and even she couldn't. He had given her hope. Hope of changing for the better. Hope of doing something to get out of that dark pit she was in. How he did that, she didn't know. Maybe it was charisma. Maybe it was just the fact that he was clearly a good guy. A guy strong enough to deflect bullets, stop moving vehicles, hold an oil rig. A guy who didn't care one bit about what his gifts could give him, but instead used them for good. Jessica wouldn't be caught dead saying she looked up to him, but she recognized that he was an example she would like to follow. So she did. Kilgrave's death had freed her mind, but it wasn't until this very moment that Jessica felt truly free of him. Closing her computer, she lay back on the couch and closed her eyes. And for the first time in a long while, she had a peaceful sleep. Natasha sighed, the slightest irritation creeping into her otherwise emotionless face. Mr. Clark Sullivan was a ghost. There wasn't a single piece of property in Cordova that belonged to a Clark Sullivan that matched the description she had of him. No houses, no apartments, no business, no boats. Nothing rented either. Either that was a fake name or the alien she was looking for had lived there without leaving any paperwork behind. With the luck she was having, probably both. Cordova was a small city, but not nearly small enough for her to go knocking from door to door, asking if they had seen a well-built man with dark hair and blue eyes. She drank a sip of coffee, looking out through the glass window of the coffee shop she was in. Her computer was opened in front of her, the top-notch Shield program running on the back, cross-referencing all the data she had on the alien with the data she had on the city. Nothing was coming up. What to do now? Should she go back and talk with Chrissy, the waitress that gave her this information? Some more? Maybe she left something important out. Should she request some agents to help her expand her search field? Decisions. There was also the possibility, quite high actually, that Clark had lied to Chrissy about living in Cordova. But Natasha didn't really think he lied. She didn't have proof, of course, but there was no reason for him to lie to someone he supposedly cared about, not on something without importance like this. Maybe it was time to go back to the basics. What did Natasha know about him? Aside from his appearance, his abilities, and his past 2 jobs, there was only one thing. He liked to help people. That was the one constant she could identify that had happened in every single place she managed to track his whereabouts. During his time in Arctic Cargo, he had saved Dr. Foster and Miss Lewis's lives, even risking revealing himself to do so. During his time working in Cassidy Pub, he had helped Chrissy, saving her from the unwanted attentions of a rude trucker that had drunk too much. Both times he had used his powers, first to save and then operate on Dr. Foster, and then to throw the trucker out and make him stop yelling obscenities and bothering the clients. Maybe that was it. Closing the non-helpful program, Natasha started to search for any freak occurrence that might have occurred on Cordova or in any region around it. A car accident that was averted, a robbery stopped, a person rescued from something or from someone. Her search didn't take long to find an interesting thing. Bright Arctic oil rig destroyed. Fire causes explosion, but no deaths occur, Natasha read, beginning to smile. She called a waiter, lifting her mug of coffee. The young man, predictably, almost fell down. Such was the hurry he was in to please Natasha. "Hello," she greeted, a beautiful smile on her face. "Could you give me a refill?" "Oh, of course," the boy answered, blushing. "Say, I heard there was an accident on an oil rig close by," she said while he filled her mug with coffee. "Did you see it happen?" The young man, ecstatic about being able to talk to such a gorgeous woman, was quick to answer. "I did. From far away." "Really? But the flames were so high. It was a huge explosion." He was a bit too excited to be talking to Natasha to notice he was sounding disturbingly happy about an explosion that might have killed people. Oh my, did anyone get hurt? That was the thing. No one died. People said, forget about it, you'll think I'm crazy. Nonsense. Natasha countered, actually curious now. You can tell me. I promise I won't think you're crazy. He seemed to ponder if that was true, but in the end he was powerless to resist. Okay. The guys who survived said they were saved by a man. An angel. Some of them said. He whispered. Natasha got closer. An angel? She whispered back, maybe too close to the boy, because he shivered a little bit. That's what they said. Now, nobody believed them, not really. They said it was just the trauma talking. But I don't see how they could have escaped without someone's help. You see, they were trapped down there with no means to pass through the fire. Everybody said they were crazy, but nobody can explain how they got from down there all the way up. And there's more. What? The waiter looked around to see if there was someone hearing them before continuing. The team on the helicopter that went there to rescue them also saw this angel. After they went all the way up and entered the helicopter, the oil rig began to fall down. They didn't have enough time to take off. So how did they? The angel. He held the oil rig. The boy put his arms up, as if holding an invisible oil rig, with his bare hands, until they took off. But what about him? He shook his head, losing his enthusiasm for a second. He didn't make it. The helicopter flew off and the oil rig exploded. He sacrificed himself. Natasha opened her mouth to ask something else when there was a loud yell from the kitchen. Thomas, stop bothering the clients and go to work. Yes, ma'am, the boy answered, apparently more afraid of his boss than he wanted to impress Natasha. It didn't matter. Natasha got what she wanted. Even more. Not only did she have a lead again, but she also learned something new about this alien. Something new and a little disturbing. She knew he was strong. Every witness had told her that. But strong enough to hold an oil rig? Strong enough to survive an explosion? Could Thor even do that? What kind of powers was this alien hiding? She needed to find him, the quicker the better. Natasha didn't think he was a threat. Not really, but a being this powerful shouldn't be walking without any kind of supervision. For a whole minute she considered her next course of action, wondering if what she was about to do was really worth the trouble. In the end, she decided to go ahead and be done with it. She needed to see what happened in that oil rig, and there was only one person who had eyes on everything unusual that happened in the world since the Battle of New York. She grabbed her cell and made the call, uttering the words she thought she would never have to. Stark, I need your help. Chapter 7, Unexpected Guests. Tony Stark was bored. Sadly, this wasn't anything new to him. Being as intelligent as he was, it was bound to happen with annoying frequency. His mind was simply that much faster than the average person's, and because of that, his brain just solved problems at an incredible speed. And when there was nothing else to solve, well, his mind just didn't deal well with idleness. It was on times like these that Tony often did most of his impulsive moves. He just craved something to do so badly that by that point he just did what he could to get things moving, which usually resulted in a lot of money spent, a horde of journalists, and sometimes damaged property and bruises. But he would do his best to contain himself. He had promised Pepper that much. And after that whole mess with Mandarin and Aldrich Killian, more than ever, she deserved his best behavior. His impulsiveness had cost him his house on Malibu and his suit collection and came pretty damn close to costing his and Pepper's lives. As with everything in his life, when Tony Stark messed up, he messed up in style. That's not to say he had been lazy since then. Oh no. The renovations on the Stark Tower, now renamed Avengers Tower, took a lot of his time, since it had to be upgraded to be the headquarters of the team. That meant he had to improve the whole structure not only to fit the people who would live there, but also to house a few Quinjets and the research and development floors, raise the security of the place, and keep and maintain his newly made Iron Legion. And, of course, there were also the improvements he made on his suits, always seeking to become better than the ones before. Hard work. Long hours, but a lot of caution not to get obsessed all over again. blowing up his armors had been a symbol of his new outlook in life and a declaration of love to Pepper, all wrapped up in one. So he couldn't exactly go back anymore. Not that he wanted to go back to that horrible place he'd been a few months back. All that, however, did not change his current predicament. With the renovations almost done, there was little input he could give anymore. Similarly, his armor also was up to date with his most recent ideas, and even if he never really stopped to think on how to improve them, he had reached perfection. At least for a few days, when he probably would have a new idea again. And with Jarvis and Pepper both running his company, there was little to do. Tony really missed the team when things got like that. Not that he would admit it, being the self-sufficient genius he was, but he felt lonely sometimes. His fame, money, intelligence, and, of course, his personality kept people away, and the ones who did try to get close were often interested in something other than friendship. At best, they were women trying to take advantage of his money, fame, and good looks. At worst, they were people trying to steal his technology and or trying to assassinate him. And of course, from Tony's perspective, even the people who genuinely didn't mean him harm were generally boring as hell. The Avengers weren't, though. Maybe fighting alongside them in a battle to save the world made him a little biased. But the fact was the members of the Avengers were, by necessity, extraordinary people. Meaning they were not tedious. Even if not all of them could follow his quick thinking like Banner could, all of them were smart and remarkable people. And Tony was frankly surprised to call them friends. Before them, Tony could count on his fingers the number of friends he had. Even Cap was a friend, something he couldn't, even with all his intelligence and resources, foresee, and he actively did try to hate the guy in the beginning. Which honestly shouldn't be difficult since the man was pretty much the opposite of him. Except apparently where it really mattered. Well, Howard would be proud, wouldn't he? One more reason to try to hate the guy. But damn that Steve Rogers for being such a likable fellow. Maybe he should throw a party, he thought. Something to commemorate the reopening of the Avengers Tower. He would call the rest of the team, obviously, or at least the ones he could reach, which were all of them except Thor, who still hadn't come back since New York. Pepper, of course, since she was his girlfriend and she probably would want to organize everything. Everyone would have a +1, and maybe he could give a call to some of Cap's old friends from the war, if any of them were still alive. Rhodey had to come too, and Happy. Maybe some celebrities from New York, but no one annoying or the ones he had already slept with. Pepper wouldn't like that. That way there would be only a few to pick from. He would have to make a list. When Tony was opening his mouth to call Jarvis so they could begin the preparations, his phone rang, the screen showing that the caller was Natasha Romanoff herself. He couldn't remember the last time she had called him, if she ever did, since she had worked undercover as his secretary. So without delay, he received the call. Not on his cell phone, that would be plebeian of him, but on the recently installed sound system of the tower. "Stark speaking," he said. For a few seconds there was no answer, just a tired sigh. And then she answered. "Stark, I need your help." It was Tony's turn to become speechless, but not for long, of course. "Jarvis, are you recording this?" he yelled. "Of course, sir. All calls made to your number are recorded for security purposes. Make a backup, 2 even, and place it in a high-security vault." Natasha sighed again, probably reconsidering her life choices. "Pass the phone to Pepper, or better yet, to Jarvis," she ordered. "No can do. Pepper is busy, and Jarvis has no secrets from me." Ignoring Tony, Jarvis actually did answer. "What can I do for you, Miss Romanoff?" he asked with his polite British accent. "Hey, thank you, Jarvis. I heard you have eyes everywhere now. Is that true?" Natasha asked. It wasn't untrue, Tony thought. After all the problems they had to find Loki and, more recently, his own problems at finding Mandarin and his people, Tony had developed and launched a lot of satellites that could work as an extension of Jarvis. While he couldn't process all the data that the satellites gathered, not even with Jarvis's help, he did have a great deal of cameras in space now, capable of looking at everything that happened in the world. It wasn't as good as S.H.I.E.L.D.'s intel gathering, but it was getting there. "It is close to the truth, Miss Romanoff," Jarvis answered. "Do you need me to find something specific for you?" "Bright Arctic oil rig," she recited. It was an oil rig located near Cordova, Alaska, that exploded. S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't have anything about it other than the fact that it burned down. I would appreciate if you could check your recordings and see if there is footage of the event itself. Tony frowned, a little curious about why Natasha would be investigating such a thing. He walked to the monitor where Jarvis was searching for the footage. I am searching the archives, Miss Romanoff. Please wait a moment. Thank you, Jarvis. You are a delight. Hey, I'm a delight too, Tony interjected, getting no answer from her. Rolling his eyes, he turned back to the screen, watching the blur of several recorded images passing rapidly, until it finally got to the right one. I am transmitting to your computer, Miss Romanoff, Jarvis said, beginning to play the recording. The image was a little bit further away than he would have liked, but it was clear enough. It showed the oil rig in the middle of the ocean, fire everywhere, a tower of black smoke in the sky. Some boats were visible on the screen too, far from the oil rig, but obviously there to make a rescue attempt. For a while, nothing really happened besides a few smaller explosions and a helicopter arriving on the scene, circling around the helipad. Then he saw a bunch of people arriving from the stairs on the helipad, being led by a shirtless and barefooted man. The shirtless man waved his hand, as if telling the people following him to make haste, as the helicopter approached to land. The workers ran to the helicopter, entering as fast as they could, with the exception of the shirtless man. He stopped and looked up, noticing what Stark had also seen. The explosions and the fire had damaged the structure, and the big tower of the oil rig began to fall down, right in the direction of the helipad. There was no time to get away. At least that was what he thought. His jaw almost dropped to the floor, however, when the shirtless man jumped closer and raised his arms, holding the multi-ton tower in place. He couldn't believe in what his eyes were seeing. That was impossible. That thing had to weight a whole lot of tons, way more than even his own suit was capable of lifting. He didn't think even Thor could do that. Maybe the Hulk would have a chance of imitating that man, but he wasn't that sure either, and he and Banner had tested the big guy's strength extensively. Romanoff, what the hell is that? He asked, without being able to look away as the man held the tower so the helicopter could take off. She didn't answer immediately, probably as shocked as he was. That is the man I'm looking for, she said finally. Stark felt his insides turn to ice for a moment. A new threat? Is he? Not a threat. Not yet, at least, and hopefully not ever. But he is an unknown. While she was talking, the man was still holding the oil rig. The helicopter managed to get away, but he was left there, and Tony could see the steel beam he was stepping on beginning to bend. In a matter of seconds, the beam gave out, and the whole thing came crashing down on top of the man, a huge explosion following. The footage stopped. That was when Stark's brain finally caught up with what Natasha had said. Is? He asked, eyes still glued to the screen, even without anything there anymore. You are saying that this guy survived this? Do you know this for certain? If he sounded alarmed, it was because he was very alarmed even. The level of strength to hold that oil rig was off the charts, and that by itself was shocking. Surviving the whole thing crashing on top of his head. Soon before everything exploded, well, he could honestly say that even the Mark XLIV, aka the Hulkbuster, wouldn't be able to deal that kind of damage, and he and Banner were co-developing that thing to be able to stop a Hulk rampage. He survived, confirmed Natasha. I was tasked by Fury to find him to assess if he is a threat. I think he isn't, by what I already saw, but I have to find him to confirm my judgment. Yes, confirming is good, Tony agreed, playing the footage again. Do you know where to start? She was in silence for a few seconds, thinking. The boats around the oil rig. Can you zoom in on them? She asked. He typed fast, doing as she asked. What are you thinking? He questioned. Well, he got there somehow, right? He wasn't wearing a uniform, so he didn't work at the oil rig. And he probably didn't swim there, or at least not all the way. So he was on one of the boats. Got it. Learn which one and you can question the crew. He finished, talking fast. That's the plan. It's a good plan. Let's do it. Jessica groaned, not daring to open her eyes. God damn it. Why all the noise? Couldn't someone sleep peacefully anymore? Do you absolutely have to make a ruckus? She asked, eyes still closed. Well, given that you are sleeping in my apartment, that it's time to go to work, and that I'm being kind enough to make eggs for you too, I would think so, Clark answered happily. She groaned again, louder. And what exactly are you doing sleeping on my couch? He asked, the sound of the frying pan and eggs loud. You told me I could stay. I told you that I wouldn't kick you out, not to sleep on my couch. That wasn't planned, she grumbled, sitting down. I just closed my eyes, and the next thing I know, you are waking me up. How long have you been up? A couple of hours. Got out, bought some things, including these eggs, and broke into your apartment for a change to borrow the frying pan. She stared at him. You broke into my apartment? He looked at her and smirked. You aren't the only one who knows how to do that, you know? He turned back and served the eggs onto the plates. By the way, there is a reason I woke you up. Someone is knocking at your door. She groaned a third time, wanting to scratch her own eyes off. Are you sure it's the door and not the freaky neighbors upstairs doing their freaky shadowinking? Clark looked again at her, a little red on the cheeks. I'm pretty sure your upstairs neighbors are siblings, he said slowly. And the noise is not shadowinking. At least I hope it's not. How the hell do you know that? Have you been spying on the neighbors with your X-ray vision? No. I just have a pretty good hearing. Wow. So you have super hearing now, is that it? As a matter of fact, I do. Now, do you want me to prove it by repeating the things you whispered in your sleep? Or do you want to see who is at your door? She stopped in her tracks and looked at him for a second. You are bluffing. I don't talk in my sleep, she challenged. Are you sure? Are you really going to bet on that? Jessica stared for a few more seconds and got up, going to the door. Not because she believed him, she told herself, but because she wanted to know who was knocking at her door. With quick steps, she opened the door, ready to send whoever was knocking away running. Only to freeze when she saw that the person knocking was her own sister, Patricia Trish Walker. Trish, she whispered, too shocked to do anything else. The woman knocking at her door turned to her. With blonde hair, a pale complexion, and shining green eyes, Trish Walker looked like a sunny version of Jessica Jones, even if they didn't share blood. That small fact, however, did not affect how close they were. For all intents and purposes, Jessica and Trish were sisters, and that made the fact that Jessica was actively avoiding Trish all the more hurting. Trish looked briefly at the apartment she had been knocking on, then back at Jessica. Was I knocking at the wrong place? She asked, getting away from the door. No, that's my apartment. I just stayed here tonight, Jessica answered, hesitantly. She frowned, not understanding, but didn't ask for an explanation. In fact, she didn't move at all. Now that Jessica was in front of her, she seemed to have lost the ability to do so. Invite her in, came Clark's voice from inside. His voice seemed to wake both of them from the trance they were in. Jessica called Trish, entering back into the apartment. With hesitant steps, she followed her inside. Still in silence, Trish looked around, taking in the details, until her eyes stopped on Clark. He smiled and approached. Hi, I'm Clark Kent, but please call me Clark. Are you a friend of Jessica? He asked, extending his hand. She took it and shook it, looking at Jessica for a moment.
I'm Patricia Walker.
You can call me Trish. I'm her sister. He was clearly surprised, looking at Jessica as well. I didn't know she had a sister. And then he looked at Trish again. Did you say Trish Walker? From Trish Talk? And it's Patsy?
I'm a fan.
You are. Jessica couldn't resist asking. Well, from Trish Talk, yes. Not so much from It's Patsy. Sorry. Trish smiled a little bit about his enthusiasm. It's always nice to meet a fan. She looked between the two of them, losing the smile. Especially when he is dating my sister. His eyebrows shot up at the exact same time Jessica choked on her own saliva. Oh no, we are not. He started. Definitely not dating, she finished. Trish held her look, not backing down. Then, please, explain this, she exploded suddenly, gesturing around, obviously tired of not understanding what was happening. She turned to Jessica. Please, explain to me why the sister I haven't seen in months is getting out from her neighbor's apartment after clearly spending the night here. Explain to me why you don't answer my calls and why I had to come all the way to your apartment. Not for the first time, to finally see you. She was fuming, looking directly at Jessica. And Jessica couldn't exactly deny she was right to be angry. Well, I can see you need to talk, Clark said quickly. I gotta go get my payment, so please make yourselves comfortable. Eat some eggs and drink some coffee. He finished eating his own eggs extremely fast and grabbed his jacket. Just lock the door when you leave, Jessica. I really can't afford being robbed at the moment. Trish, it was a pleasure. And with this, the faster she had seen him move without becoming a blur in the air, Clark left. She turned to Trish, who was still looking at her. Okay, explanations. I owe some of them to you, Jessica finally said. You think? Trish retorted. Do you have any idea how worried I was? After all that crap you went through, after finally getting out from Kilgrave's control, you disappeared. No calls, no visits, nothing. Why, Jess? Why would you be so irrational? Because I was embarrassed, Jessica yelled, reaching her limit. Because I was humiliated. Trish looked surprised at her. Her expression softened. Jess, we both know that wasn't your fault. Yes, I know it wasn't my fault. I know I was being controlled. I know that there was nothing I could have done to stop him from doing the things he did, to others and to myself. She interrupted. It doesn't mean I didn't feel like it was. She breathed and looked down, incapable of staring at her sister. I just couldn't face you, she admitted, her voice low. Not after that. I felt like no matter how much I tried to get clean, the dirt just wouldn't come off. Trish approached slowly and tentatively, and when Jessica didn't move away, she embraced her. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Hesitantly, Jessica raised her arms and embraced her too. Me too. For a few minutes, neither of them moved, content in staying in each other's arms. Then they let their arms fall. Are you okay now? Trish asked. I mean, I know you are not okay, but are you getting better? Jessica's first answer would be a default hell no. But she stopped and thought a little bit. She wasn't okay, no doubt about that, but getting better? Yes, since yesterday she could honestly say she felt better. She nodded. I'm getting better. Trish gestured to the apartment around them. Does Clark have something to do with this? She inquired, raising her eyebrows a little bit. Jessica didn't answer. Instead, she picked the New York Bulletin from the couch and gave it to Trish. She frowned, confused, until she saw Clark's name. He wrote this? I heard about it. Something about a guy making mutants, right? Yes and yes. And I was there with him yesterday, fighting against armed men to help those people, she explained quickly. Trish did a double take, her jaw dropping. You were? Are you doing this sort of thing again? Being a hero? Jessica chuckled. If you had asked me this a day ago, I would say, heck no. But apparently I am now. And then she told Trish what had happened, from seeing Clark running over a car, to finally fighting the armed henchman and that strong bitch. And more than the actual facts, she told Trish what it had meant to her, which, frankly, surprised the hell of Jessica, since she wasn't one to share. She probably hadn't woken up completely yet. That had to be it. So are you going to do this again? Are you going to help people again? Trish asked after she had told her story. Don't know. Maybe. I think I'll evaluate case by case. Well, at least you have someone as strong as you now, right? He can have your back. It's safer. Slightly stronger. Just a tiny bit. And I shouldn't even have told you that. Oh, come on, what am I going to do? Tell the police? You know you can trust me. I know that, she admitted begrudgingly. But he doesn't. Anyway, I don't know yet. We'll see how it goes. There were a few minutes of comfortable silence when Jessica took the chance to eat her cold scrambled eggs. Okay, quick question, Trish said abruptly. I know you helped Clark. I know you saved a lot of people together, but how does that amount to you sleeping here and eating his breakfast? Why the hell did he just leave us here instead of kicking us out back to your apartment? Is there something going on here? Jessica stopped her egg-filled fork midair. No, I already told you that. He is just a friend. A really, really hot one, Trish interjected, smirking. He's 21, you cougar. I'm just saying I wouldn't mind. He is legal. Oh, God, Jessica groaned, beginning to laugh. Her laugh seemed to break the dam, and Trish also began to laugh uncontrollably. Jessica didn't know what the heck she would do in the future, if she would keep being a hero or not, or if she was going to try to put her life together and move on. But at the moment, laughing alongside her sister, talking about everyday crap, she didn't particularly care. At that moment, she was happy. Clark looked at the envelope in his hands for what seemed to be the 1,000th time, and for the 1,000th time, he smiled. His first paycheck. He really did it. It wasn't just until he got into the New York Bulletin building and actually received his paycheck from Mr. Ellison himself that the idea he was being paid for his first published story had really sank in. They still hadn't hired him. There was that, but he was off to a great start. Not every journalist in the world could brag about getting a front-page story at the very first time. What to do now? He was a little hesitant about going back home. Jessica and her famous sister, who would have thought, really needed to talk about some things, apparently. If he went back right now, he had a chance of interrupting them, and he really didn't want to get into the middle of the crossfire if a fight erupted. Sure, that meant he basically kicked himself out of his own apartment, but it was for a good cause. He hoped Jessica had helped him. He didn't mind helping her, even if it was a little bit inconvenient. So that meant he needed to find something to do for the next couple of hours. If he had friends in the city, that would be the perfect time to go bother them. Unfortunately, Jessica was his only friend so far, and she was the whole reason he couldn't go home yet. Acquaintances then. Luke seemed to be a pretty nice guy, but the bar wasn't open yet. Malcolm, his other neighbor, obviously lived in the same building, so he wasn't an option. Susan Harris, the beautiful real estate agent who gave him her number, was probably working right now. And the only other people he knew were the people he saved from that fire. He stopped for a second. Why not? The woman he rescued had promised to stop doing drugs and had signed her name to start on a free rehab program. Right there at the Metro General Hospital. It wouldn't hurt to see if she was doing okay. It wasn't like she was going to remember him, anyway. And he didn't even need to talk to her just to see how she was. So, making a decision, he got in the bus. It wasn't long until he got out and walked to the hospital. Getting in. He didn't have the slightest idea where he was supposed to go. So he just kept walking, hoping he would find someone that knew along the way. That meant he soon was in the ER, surrounded with the sick and injured. His eyes spotted a familiar nurse. Hey, could you? Not now, I'm busy, the nurse said, not even looking at Clark, while she began to treat one of the patients. He couldn't argue with that. The place was full, and there was a very small number of nurses and doctors around in comparison with the number of injured people. Instead of distracting her, Clark just watched as she tried to stitch the arm of a man who was apparently very drunk. Each time she approached, the guy moved his arm, not because he was afraid of the needle, but because he was swaying nonstop. Seeing the nurse starting to get more and more frustrated, Clark held the man in place. Thanks, she said, beginning to work. While stitching the guy, she took a look at Clark. I remember you. You are the guy who brought those junkies who almost got themselves burned to death. Good memory, he complimented.
I'm Clark.
Claire, she introduced herself. So, did you bring any more people today? Because I really don't need any more patients right now. Clark smiled. No, not today. Did something happen? Or is it usually this full of people? Car accident nearby, I think, but it's not that much fuller than usual. I would know. I've been here since yesterday. Why? You're the only nurse in the hospital. Clark joked. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one in the city, she chuckled. With her blue uniform covered in blood spots, her tired face, and her somehow disheveled hair, Clark could believe it. That was the look of someone who had been working non-stop for a long while. And while some people would find that her messy appearance needed to be fixed, it told a lot about her dedication to her work. Even like that, Clark thought, Claire was still a beautiful woman, with dark hair and skin and a striking face. Given that she was working for a whole day and was covered in blood, Clark could just imagine she would be a real beauty after a bath and a rest. I actually wanted to ask about the people I brought here that day, Clark began. You were the one who suggested that rehab program, and I'd like to know how they are doing. Well, I actually have no idea, Claire answered bluntly. Clark laughed. I imagined, but if you could give me directions, I'll go there and see for myself. She finished stitching the man and took a step back. If you wait until I check these last. She looked back and counted 2 patients. I can take you there. It shouldn't take long. He smiled again. No problem. Changing her gloves, Claire walked with quick steps to the next patient, Clark following her close. It was a boy, reaching his teenage years, cradling his arm with a tear-streaked face. Now, how did that happen? Claire asked, firmly but gently, touching the boy's arm. Football, he sobbed. Fell down in the game. Claire nodded, still examining him. Unknown to her, Clark was also examining his arm, looking at it with his X-ray vision. It might be broken, she said. I will take you to the X-ray room. It's not broken, Clark interjected. Claire and the boy looked at him. Just dislocated. How can you possibly know that? It's a strong guess, he answered lamely. Well, while I normally take into consideration any strong guesses of an untrained man in the ER. When I'm examining someone, today I'll take the long way and send him to do a proper examination. Claire deadpanned, calling someone to take the boy to the X-ray room and already moving to the next patient. This time it was a woman clearly agitated, but also very pale and weak.
Claire.
What seems to be the problem? You aren't a doctor, the woman sneered. Claire's nice smile strained, but it stayed where it was. No, ma'am, I'm not. But I will direct you to the proper doctor as soon as I know more about your condition. The woman wasn't happy, but whatever she was going to say was stopped by a bout of nausea. Clark and Claire took a step back, but the woman managed to hold down the need to puke. Nausea, she managed to say. And I'm so tired all the time. Also, I'm twins, Clark exclaimed before he could stop himself. Both women turned to him. What did you just say to me, young man? You are. He stammered, realizing his mistake. You might be pregnant, ma'am, Claire said, stepping in. The woman did not look happy. In fact, a photo of her expression could probably be found on a dictionary under the opposite of happy. My husband can't have any children, she said. Oh, that's not good, Clark brilliantly responded, his enthusiasm dying. Claire was momentarily speechless, but before this could turn into a huge fight, she just called a passing doctor, exchanging a few words with him, and he took the woman with him for further examination. Okay, what the hell was that? She demanded, holding Clark's arm. What's with all the medical diagnoses? Are you a doctor in disguise? What? No. What is it, then? And don't you dare try to say to me it was a strong guess. Clark opened his mouth to give her an excuse. Any excuse, but nothing came out. He looked at her again and tried once more. I can do things that other people can't, he finished, feeling stupid. She raised her eyebrows. Yeah? Like what? Magic? Bullshit, she interrupted before he could say anything. I should take you to the psych ward. What if I can prove it? Clark asked, not really sure why he was even insisting on this. Jessica was a bad influence on him. She nodded, still watching him. Okay. Houdini, follow me. Turning, she left the ER and Clark followed her. He had no idea in what he was getting into, and he was slowly beginning to think this was a bad idea. Actually, he already knew it was a bad idea. And yet somehow he wasn't that concerned. That, by itself, was weird. Maybe using his powers on a daily basis was making him more comfortable with the idea of being seen as different. Maybe his brief time with someone as gifted as him made him feel more normal. Clark didn't know. Nevertheless, he wasn't afraid of the woman in front of him finding out that he had something else than the average person. His instincts did not see her as a threat. That had to count for something. Claire took him 3 floors up to the ICU directly to a patient room. She opened the door and entered. The patient was sleeping either naturally or because he was sedated. He was hooked to an 4, and the monitor was beeping slowly. "Okay," Claire said, looking at Clark. "If you really can do things that other people can't, tell me what's wrong with this guy." Clark looked at her for a second before turning and walking to the patient. "What happened?" he asked. "He passed out in his house 3 days ago. The neighbors called an ambulance. He had seizures and strong headaches," Claire explained. "After getting here, he had strong abdominal pain and his heart stopped twice. And you have no idea of what's causing this?" Claire gave a mirthless laugh. "If we did, I wouldn't be here with you," she shrugged. "But the guy is dying. He doesn't have anything to lose, and the only thing I have to lose is my time. You either really can do things that other people can't, in which case you can save him, or you can't, in which case I prove that you are a liar and kick you out from the hospital." Very pragmatic, she smiled. "I found that it's useless to debate belief. You either show me proof or you shut up. If you had told me you could fly, we would be on the roof right now and I would tell you to jump." Clark gave her a smile, but not for the reasons she was thinking. "All right, let's see what I can do." Saying this, Clark focused on his eyes. It was always an interesting experience to change the kind of vision he was using. Colors became different, heat and electromagnetic waves became visible, and really small or far-away objects gained definition. The man's body gained a bluish tone when his eyes passed through his clothes and skin. His bones and muscles showed up. He could see every vein and artery, every involuntary movement of his organs, and the blood flowing. Unconsciously, his hearing also became enhanced when he concentrated and he could hear every single thing happening in the man's body, from muscles twitching to blood being pumped. There was only one thing in the whole body he couldn't see. A small, black dot on his right femur. Was he ever shot? Clark asked suddenly. In the right leg, maybe? Claire, who was observing him with attention, waiting for him to do something, was shocked into motion. "I think so," she said, reaching for his medical history. She read it quickly. "Yeah, 6 years ago. He was mugged, resisted, and was shot. In the right leg." She looked at him. "How the hell did you know that?" Clark smiled. "It's either a strong guess or I really can do things that other people can't," he answered cheekily. Claire gave him a serious look. "Well, it doesn't matter anyway, because it's clearly not related to anything," she said. "On the contrary, it's the cause of everything that's happening," Clark countered. "Whoever took the bullet out didn't do a good job. They left a piece inside his bone. The lead from the bullet is slowly leaking out. This is lead poisoning." Claire kept looking at his face, each word he said making her more surprised. She read the file again and looked at the patient again, checking and rechecking his symptoms and comparing them to Clark's diagnosis. "Son of a bitch," he whispered, looking at Clark with a whole other expression. "How? You know what? It doesn't matter. I think you just saved this man's life." And with that, she ran out, calling a doctor to explain the situation. Clark couldn't help to be a little bothered by the attention he had just brought on himself, but he did save a life. His discomfort was a small price to pay for that. Soon after, Claire was back, with a doctor accompanying her. The doctor, clad in his white coat, didn't even look at Clark. He just got in, approached the patient, read his file, and stared at the gunshot scar on his leg. Then he turned and looked at Clark with a very serious expression. "How did you do this?" he asked rudely. "More intelligent men than you couldn't figure it out." Clark, not exactly wanting to explain he could see through things, and a little bit offended by the doctor's tone, just answered, "I'm a magician." He could hear Claire doing her best to hold a laugh from behind him. The doctor, however, was anything but amused. He raised one single eyebrow and kept staring. "There is no such thing as magic," he finally said, completely unamused but clearly curious about how Clark had found this out. He turned to Claire. "Miss Temple, take this sorcerer out of the ICU. I'll go prep this patient for surgery." With this, without saying anything else, he left. "Nice guy," said Clark sarcastically. "That's Dr. Stephen Strange," Claire explained. "He is a little, don't you dare, strange," Clark completed, grinning. She sighed, irritated. "If I had a nickel for every time. No, I was going to say he is kind of an asshole, but he is brilliant at what he does. He agrees with your diagnostic and will perform the surgery himself." She looked at him and smiled for real for the first time. "Come on, Houdini. I owe you one. Let me take you to the rehab clinic." Martha Kent held the phone between her ear and her shoulder, her hands busy with a basket full of freshly picked apples. With a lifetime of practice, she washed them and began to cut them, preparing the apples to fill her famous apple pie. All the while she listened to her son on the phone, telling her all about his first published story. She smiled. Martha could just picture a young Clark sitting at the table behind her, watching her baking his favorite pie, telling her about his day. Of course, back then, Clark's days didn't involve breaking into a mutant factory and causing the arrest of several high-up government people. They were still weird, she had to admit, like the day he got home all scared because he had accidentally ripped a car door, or the day he had also accidentally set part of the school gym on fire with his heat vision. Well, maybe more embarrassed than scared on the second one, since it was on that day that he discovered his heat vision, at least in the beginning, could be triggered by the sight of the small skirts of the cheerleaders. "Mom, why are you laughing at me?" Clark asked, no doubt hearing her trying to hold her laugh. "Sorry, dear. I was just remembering the day you set the gym on fire because of those cheerleaders," she answered, no longer being able to hold back. He sighed while she laughed. "You'll never let me forget that, will you?" he questioned, resigned. "Not in a million years, dear. It is my duty as a mother to remember every single embarrassing thing in your life, so I can pass them on to your future wife. Like you did with Lana? You know, she never really forgave me for finding out that my X-ray vision could be controlled to limit itself to only see through clothes right when I looked at her. That wasn't my fault. You ran away and left the poor girl alone, without a clue of what to do. I had to explain to her what happened. You didn't have to be specific." Martha laughed again, remembering her son's first girlfriend. What a nice girl she was. It was a pity that they preferred to remain only friends. Nice, beautiful girls that could accept the fact that Clark wasn't human and keep it a secret were a rare find.
Okay, Mom, I gotta go.
I'll talk to you tomorrow. Love you. I love you too, dear. Take care of yourself. She lowered the phone and got back to her pie, still smiling. Martha had a very positive outlook on life, but since Jonathan died, there were still times when she felt a little bit lonely. Clark, of course, had to move on with his life. She would never begrudge that, but nothing gave her quite as much happiness as when he called her or, better yet, took the time to fly to Smallville and see her in person. Still distracted, Martha was broken out of her old memories when the doorbell rang. Drying her hands, she left the kitchen and went to the door, opening it. There was a very beautiful red-headed woman waiting on her porch. "Martha Kent, my name is Natasha Romanoff. I'd like to talk about your son, Clark Kent. May I come in?" Chapter 8: Motherhood and Apple Pie. Natasha had done a lot of unusual things during her missions. Being trained as a spy and as an assassin since she was a child had pretty much guaranteed that she had lived through the most diverse situations. As a kid, during training, she once killed a man by pretending to be just a lost child in the street, crying and afraid, looking for her parents, only to assassinate her rescuer with a needle in the eye. She infiltrated a strip club once, as a young woman, and became so sought out because of her beauty and sensuality that the club offered a closed-door performance to a group of Russian politicians, which then she proceeded to slaughter, alongside her bosses and her co-workers. And maybe one of her most regretful jobs was the time she had to infiltrate Stark Industries as Tony's secretary, having to go as far as making some of her coworkers sick so she could have the privilege of taking documents directly to him in order to be able to assess his personality for the Avengers initiative. That job still kept her up some nights. Sitting at a table on a farm, eating a huge piece of apple pie, while being shown baby pictures of the alien she was pursuing by his adoptive mother was a new experience, even to her. "Look at how little he was," cooed Martha, pointing at a particularly cute one, where Clark was sleeping in a crib. Natasha, of course, knew what she was trying to do. It wasn't as if she were being subtle about it. She was a government agent pursuing an alien, not long after an alien invasion that left the world terrified. She was after a potential threat, someone who could be a danger to Earth and everyone on it. Martha was providing her another perspective. It wasn't subtle, but it was effective. "We were so relieved when he began to sleep peacefully like that," Martha continued. "We didn't know what to do before." "Was he sick?" asked Natasha. "How could we know, dear? He arrived in a spaceship." "Clark might have looked human, but he wasn't one," she explained, serving Natasha another piece of pie. The doctor thought that he might have something wrong with his hearing and did a test to see how well he was listening. Clark yelled so loud after that little click that every single glass object in the neighborhood broke, including car windows. Natasha raised her eyebrows. "Quite a pair of lungs," she remarked. "Oh, you have no idea. He almost made us crazy in the beginning, crying loud enough to shake the house. He was a handful as a kid." Martha smiled as if remembering the past. Normal parents have to worry about their kids hitting their heads or choking on something. The things we had to worry about were slightly different. When Clark was learning how to walk, for example, he fell down and hit the wall. Now, thank God he didn't hurt his head, but his head did hurt the wall. He made a hole and fell out of the house. We had to run through the door and around the house to pick him up. Natasha couldn't help but smile, eating another piece of pie. And of course, there was the time Jonathan had the brilliant idea of teaching him to play football. Clark tossed the ball so far that we never found it again. It probably left orbit, Martha laughed. "Ah, but I wouldn't trade that for anything." "Weren't you afraid?" Natasha asked. "Of course we were, but not from Clark." "Dear, the one thing I wanted in this life was to be a mother," she said, placing her hand on top of her womb. "But nature was not so kind to me. Couldn't have a child. I prayed every single day so that I could have one. And one night, baby boy descended from the sky right in front of my house. If that wasn't an answer to my prayers, then I don't know what it was." That rang particularly deep to Natasha. She also couldn't have children of her own, but not because nature was unkind to her. People were. "Do you have a kid?" Martha asked gently, seeing Natasha look at a baby picture. "I can't be a mother," Natasha answered, almost inaudible after a while. Martha placed a hand on her shoulder. "Being a mother is less about this," she said, touching Natasha's belly softly. "And more about this," she finished, touching her heart. "If giving birth was all it took to be a mother, there would be a whole lot more happy families out there. Turns out it isn't. Family is more than sharing blood, dear." Natasha was genuinely touched by what Martha said and a little embarrassed because of that. "You said you weren't afraid of Clark?" she asked, because she was curious and to shift the conversation away from her. "What were you afraid of?" Martha sighed. "The government. Anyone that could take Clark away from us, really. The first few weeks we were sure someone would show up at our door, but no one ever came. Jonathan had a friend who managed to speed up the process of adoption and keep it quiet, but until that happened, well, we had a lot of tense days. And of course raising an alien couldn't have been easy," Natasha added. She laughed. "Oh, if only you knew," Martha answered. "But I couldn't be prouder of the man he became." That Natasha could believe. Alien or not, Clark was Martha's son, and she loved him more than anything. Usually, the love of a mother was a poor indicator of someone's character. Every villain had a mother, after all, and they all usually loved their children regardless of what they did. But Martha did not look like a mother who would turn a blind eye to a son's bad decisions. Quite the contrary, actually. That boded well for her assessment of Clark. While Natasha was thinking that, a loud sound thundered, like the sky was being split into two. She took her hand to the concealed pistol on her jacket. "Don't be afraid, dear," Martha said, obviously noticing her alertness. "That's just Clark. Was he arriving in a supersonic jet? What else could possibly make a sound like that?" Her questions, however, went unanswered, as the sound disappeared and everything was silenced for a few seconds until a voice came from the outside. "Mom!" And the door was pushed open with force. Natasha's first thought was that Clark Kent was an imposing man. Much taller than herself, built with as much muscle as Thor or Steve, Clark walked into the house like a huge predator looking for a threat. His blue eyes crossed the room, fixing themselves on her, and for 1 second, Natasha was actually frozen into place. It was a dangerous look, lacking the rage the Hulk had, but with the same promise of utter destruction to those foolish enough to challenge it. He thought she was a threat to his mother, Natasha realized. "Clark Joseph Kent," exclaimed Martha suddenly. "What do you think you were doing, bashing the door like this?" Clark was obviously surprised, his eyes losing their intensity as he looked to his mother. "But Mom?" "No, but we are having a civilized conversation here. There is no need to make a ruckus." Before her very eyes, Clark seemed to change completely. The force of pure destruction that had entered the house was no more. What she was seeing now was just a young man being lectured by his mother. The change was so absurd that she almost smiled, a mental image of the Hulk being grounded playing on her mind. Chastised, Clark closed the door very carefully and began to approach the table. He was a handsome man, with a very nicely sculpted face and a chiseled jaw. His eyes were extremely blue, and his hair was dark and loose in a carefree way. Like she had already noticed, Clark was very tall and very well built, the kind of muscles Natasha had only seen on super soldiers, Asgardians, or unbelievably trained agents. All in all, Darcy Lewis's description of him as a dark-haired, hunky, blue-eyed beefcake of a man was spot on, in Natasha's humble opinion. "Clark, this is Natasha Romanoff, as I am sure you already know," Martha introduced as Clark got close to the table. "She wanted to ask some questions about that spaceship you took. How that woman could make a SHIELD agent questioning about the hijacking of an alien ship sound exactly like, 'The principal called and told me what you did at school.'" Natasha didn't know. She imagined it had something to do with being a mother. Clark looked at her, his expression a mix of surprise and resignation. He sighed. "I'm sorry about entering like that," he apologized. "I was scared about a known assassin alone with your mother?" Natasha finished. "Well, yes, I guess. But I see I was wrong, so I apologize." He extended his hand. "I'm Clark Kent, as I'm sure you know, but call me Clark. Natasha Romanoff." She shook his hand. Smiling, Martha pointed outside. "Show her the farm, Clark. You two need to talk, and I have another pie in the oven." She turned to Natasha. "But make sure to come back after your talk. You have to try the apple pie straight out of the oven, with my homemade vanilla ice cream." That did sound good. Natasha couldn't help but think, before focusing on her mission again. "I will, ma'am," she answered, smiling, getting up and following Clark to the door. Both of them got outside. It was a sunny afternoon, very pleasant, even if it was a bit chilly. The Kent farm was a beautiful place, with fields of green grass, apple trees everywhere, cows eating quietly, and an honest-to-God windmill. It reminded Natasha of Clint's house, only without the kids running around. At the same time Natasha observed the farm. However, she did observe Clark too. She didn't think he would run or attack her. That wasn't a concern. But she did want to learn as much as she could, and there was a lot that could be interpreted by body language alone. Clark was nervous, that much was clear. She would even go as far as to say he was afraid, but doubtfully for himself. His mother, then. A weak point, the Black Widow deep in Natasha's mind whispered, one that could be explored by someone with the intention of causing harm. There was also the fact that he probably wasn't used to being recognized by what he was, an alien. It was something Natasha could understand, at least a little bit. Her entire life she hid in the shadows, never really letting anyone see her for what she was until the shroud was removed during the Battle of New York. She had fought alongside the Avengers under the bright daylight, in front of God knows how many witnesses and cameras. She was a celebrity now. Anyone knew who she was just by looking at her. Worse yet, they knew what she was. Of course, most of what she did would never be public, but being recognized on the streets, having action figures designed after her likeness, and seeing children dressing up as her to play was still very disturbing. Clark was feeling like that as well, she imagined. His entire life he had to hide what he was, hide what he could do, never being able to be completely honest with anyone out of fear. Fear of rejection, yes, but also fear for his and his family's safety. And now an agent from a spy organization had shown up at his doorstep. "How did you find me?" Clark asked, suddenly, stopping by the side of a fence. Natasha stood by his side, watching his face for a moment. "The ship," she said, turning to look at the horses. "You saved Dr. Foster's and Miss Lewis's lives and stole a ship being guarded by the military forces of two countries. It called attention." He sighed. "I imagined that. But how did you do it? I thought I had covered my tracks pretty well." She smiled a little bit. "You didn't make it easy. I talked with Dr. Foster and Miss Lewis trying to profile you. I got a general description of your appearance and, more importantly, a general description of how you act. From there, I spoke with the manager of Arctic Cargo. He pointed me in the direction of Cassidy Pub, where he had hired you. There, I spoke with Chrissy. Chrissy, how is she?" "She misses you," Natasha answered softly. "You know, there are worse things than settling down with a beautiful girl that likes you." He smiled sadly. "There are," he agreed. "But she deserves someone who can give her a normal life. I can't do that." He didn't say anything else, so Natasha took it as a signal to continue. "Chrissy told me you moved from Cordova, so that was my next stop. I almost lost you there. No paper trail at all, my compliments." He smiled at her little joke. "But, like I said, I managed to gather some of your behavior patterns. You helped people everywhere you passed, no exceptions. So I looked for weird happenings, people being helped in unconventional ways. The oil rig, he supposed." "The oil rig," she confirmed. "I managed to acquire footage of the event itself." That surprised Clark. "There was footage?" he asked, surprised. "There is always a camera," Natasha said, pointing up. "Satellites make sure the entire world is always being watched. There was no way to tell it was you, but I knew what I was looking for." "Right?" he said, obviously bothered. "With the footage, I managed to find the boat you were on before you swam to the oil rig." "The Debbie Sue," he said, smiling. "The pride and joy of Captain Harold's son." "The Debbie Sue," she nodded. "Captain Harold's son, of course, had only the fake name you gave him. But he did remember you talking about a weird town." She imitated his rough voice. "Tinyville, small city, hell, Smallville. That's it." He took his hand to his eyes. "Yeah, he did have a good laugh when I told him that. Well, with that, I came all the way here. Since I didn't have your name, I did the same thing I did on Cordova and looked for weird occurrences. There were quite a lot of them, but only one with a witness. Peter Ross, one of the students on the school bus that drove off a bridge and was saved by divine providence. Pete, is he still working at that IHOP? He is. And he was the one who pointed me in the right direction after I convinced him I wasn't a threat. I guess being a world-famous hero has some perks." Clark just kept staring at the horizon for a few seconds. Then he turned to her. "So, now what? Am I under arrest?" he asked. Natasha leaned on the fence by his side. "Now we get to know each other," she answered. He eyed her. "Just like that. Just like that," she confirmed. "I am not here to arrest you, or to kill you. I doubt I would even be capable of that, given the things I already saw. I'm going to be honest with you. Clark, you are an unknown, and an incredibly powerful one at that. If my boss had seen what you did at that oil rig, he would have an aneurysm. Clark smiled, but there was no trace of happiness there. My father believed that if the world found out what I really was, they'd reject me. He was convinced that the world wasn't ready. I suppose he was right. Natasha tilted her head. In my experience, the world is never ready for anything. Things just happen. We try to be prepared, to always be one step ahead. But predicting everything is impossible. So we just learn to roll with it. He didn't answer for a whole minute, just looking at the sun, thinking. I didn't even know that I wasn't human for most of my life, he said, abruptly. I knew I was different, of course, but the thought that I wasn't human had never crossed my mind. What happened with the school bus? When I took the bus out of the water, Pete saw me. He was scared, so he told his mother. So she came here with him, telling my family that what happened was divine providence. A miracle. So I asked my father if she was right. What did he tell you? He showed me the ship I arrived in, told me I wasn't human at all, that somewhere else I had another father who gave me another name, and that he had sent me here for a reason, and that I owed it to myself to find out what that reason was. Clark fiddled with his shirt and took out a pendant, a weird black object around his neck. This was the only thing I had with me when I arrived, he said, showing it to her. It was a black prism, a few centimeters long, with an S shape on one of the extremities. No messages, no notes, just this. My father brought it to a friend so he could analyze it, but the guy couldn't figure out what it was made of. Whatever it was alien. Natasha didn't say anything. She just kept listening, interested. After my father died, I went out in the world looking for clues. Anything that could give me a direction. He shrugged. I found nothing. And for a while there I was really beginning to lose hope that I would. Until one day, this little thing here began to float. Float? Yeah, spin like a compass, always pointing north. I didn't understand why it was doing that, since it never did anything before, but I had nothing to lose, so I began to travel north until I arrived at that very restaurant where you were. Cassidy Pub. And when I was working there, I began to hear conversations about something the military had found on Ellesmere Island. Something under the ice. Something not of this planet. So I did what I could to get there. And you found the ship, Natasha stated. He smiled. And I found the ship. Imagine my surprise when I found an entrance that fit my pendant precisely. And my astonishment when that seemed to turn on the ship and a man appeared out of nothing. Natasha raised her eyebrows. Out of nothing? A hologram generated by the ship because of my pendant. That took the form of my biological father. Clark smiled, seeing the surprise in her eyes. Yeah, shocked the hell out of me too, but in a good way. I had so many questions about what I was, where I came from, and what I could do. Why was I sent here? She was staring at him now, entranced with the story. Where do you come from? I was born on a planet called Krypton, he answered. It was the birthplace of an ancient and very advanced civilization. Long ago, in what they called the era of expansion, the Kryptonians spread out through the stars, seeking new worlds to settle upon. That ship on Ellesmere Island? It was one of thousands launched into the void. They built outposts on other planets, using great machines to reshape environments to their needs. And for 100,000 years, Kryptonian civilization flourished. Natasha was unable to speak while listening to his tale, trying to imagine an empire with that magnitude. Eventually, however, they stopped, Clark continued. The exploration was abandoned, the outposts left behind. The ships were called back. Artificial population control was established. Krypton had exhausted their natural resources. They just isolated themselves? She asked. They tried to limit and control the use of the resources they had, Clark clarified, but they did it poorly. Later on, somehow, they decided to mine the core of the planet to get the resources they needed directly from there, even against the advice of Krypton scientists. That doesn't sound good, Natasha summarized. No, it doesn't sound good at all, Clark agreed. Instead of finding abundance of resources, they only managed to make the core unstable. It accelerated the decay of the planet. The core began to implode. The picture Clark was painting was not a happy one. She imagined Clark was a member of a civilization like the Asgardian one, somehow stranded far away from home on a planet that was not his. By the looks of it, though, Clark didn't have a home planet anymore. Krypton? Krypton doesn't exist anymore, Clark confirmed, somberly. What they did couldn't be stopped. My father, Jor-El, was one of Krypton's brightest scientists, and he foresaw the calamity. He tried to convince the Council to do something, to at least try to save some part of Krypton's heritage. But by that time, one of Krypton's military leaders attempted a coup. Clark looked at Natasha. My parents placed me into a spaceship at that very same day. Moments later, the man who attempted the coup, General Zod, murdered my father and was arrested, alongside his soldiers. He looked back at the horizon. Krypton blew up not long after that. Natasha could barely imagine something like that. As unique and detached from others as she was, Natasha was still surrounded by humans. Even after leaving her birthplace, Natasha was still standing in the same planet, with the possibility of visiting or hearing about it any time she wanted to. Clark was alone, the last son of Krypton. No home to come back to, no fellow Kryptonians to talk to, no knowledge about their culture. Utterly and completely alone in a world that was not his. Natasha didn't know anyone who could comprehend living like that. I am so sorry, Clark, she said, placing a hand on his shoulder, and she meant it. He didn't look at her, but he acknowledged her with a nod. Thank you. Both of them stayed in silence for a few minutes, enjoying the heat of the sun and the sounds of the birds. I don't know much about my past, Natasha said, breaking the silence. I was taken when I was still a child to be trained as an assassin. My life before that, my home, my parents, they are just a bunch of images and feelings that I occasionally have when I dream. She didn't know why she was telling him this. Maybe, in part, to share his burden. Maybe to share hers. Whatever the reason, it seemed to pick Clark's attention. They took you as a child? He asked, clearly shocked. That's normal. The usual way. Kids are malleable. They learn faster and they don't question. Perfect to be trained. I was going to say awful, but I don't think it's enough to describe this, he corrected. She smiled. That too, she agreed. Anyway, what I meant by this is, don't think about what could have been. The life you could have had with your parents in Krypton, the life I could have had with my parents in Russia, they are but wishful thinking. What happened, happened. It's not going to change. What we can change is the future. Clark considered her words and smiled. The only direction in life that matters is forward. I heard that one before. Then whoever told you that is wise because they happen to agree with me, Natasha stated, smirking. That seemed to lift his spirits, even if a little bit, so she decided to press on. What can you tell me about your abilities? She asked, wanting a more detailed explanation of what he could do. He considered his words for a moment. Krypton was a harsh place. He began, so life in there evolved just as harsh. When the first living organisms began to appear, Krypton was just a rock filled with ice, with a gravity way stronger than Earth's. So as time went on, the first animals adapted to survive these conditions, growing strong muscles and a dense skeleton. The cold and the lack of food were maneuvered by the ability to absorb radiation directly from the sun and use that energy. Clark looked at Natasha. Earth's environment is much richer. The atmosphere is more nourishing, the gravity is weaker. The sun is younger than Krypton's sun, still strong, yellow, and bright. My cells drink its radiation, strengthening my muscles, my bones, my skin, and my senses. I'm stronger than a human by a wide margin. Quicker and much more resistant too. My senses are also more developed, he shrugged. I've grown stronger here than even my father thought possible. And the truth is, I'm still getting stronger. So I can't really tell much about it, because I don't even know what I'm capable of. If what he did with that oil rig was any indication, Natasha would put him just next to the Hulk in terms of raw strength. The fact that he was still getting stronger, however, made his potential impossible to measure. That was frankly difficult to swallow. One of those things that were, at the same time, amazing and frightening. You don't have to be afraid of me, you know? Clark said, as if he could hear her thoughts. I have no intention of doing anything against the people of Earth. This is my home, Natasha. The people who took me in, who loved me and who I love back more than anything, are from this very planet. I'm not a threat to it. She held his stare for a long minute. I believe you, but I'm not sure my superiors will. Not without some sort of guarantee. Such as, let me introduce you to my boss. He is one of the good guys, even if a little paranoid. He appeared to be thinking about it. If I go with you, then I want something in return, he countered. What? My name, my identity. I want you to promise me that the name Clark Joseph Kent won't be put into S.H.I.E.L.D. system. What do you mean? Natasha, if people know who I am, they'll know who my mother is. That can't happen. This is S.H.I.E.L.D. We are the good guys. We can protect her.
No.
She sighed, putting her hands on her waist. Those 2 women you saved in the ship? They were very important to Thor. Jane Foster is his lover. Darcy Lewis is his friend. When Loki attacked, we protected them. Do you trust everyone there, Natasha? Every single person in S.H.I.E.L.D.? He asked, suddenly. Her silence was enough answer. That's what I thought. Loki was an external threat. But what if someone from inside decides to threaten my mother? What if they think it's a good idea to use her to control me? Natasha wanted to tell him that would never happen. But that wouldn't be true. There were less than unsavory characters working for S.H.I.E.L.D., even if they were the good guys. Thor is the prince of a very powerful, very advanced civilization, he continued. If someone threatens Dr. Foster, that can very well mean the beginning of a war you can't win, so it won't happen. I don't have that sort of pull. So if someone in there ends up putting my mother in risk, she raised her eyebrow slowly. Is that a threat? He didn't back down. I won't kill anyone, Natasha. I don't do that sort of thing. But if someone inside of S.H.I.E.L.D. puts my mother's life in risk, I will hold this person responsible. Even if I have to tear S.H.I.E.L.D. down to do it. And there won't be enough places to hide, bunkers strong enough to defend them, armies big and well-equipped enough to stop me. I will take them to prison, even if I have to build a prison with my own hands. And the incredible thing was that Natasha believed him. His eyes, when he arrived and entered his house, thinking she was a threat to Martha, appeared in her mind. Eyes of someone who would not let a loved one be harmed. Not without retribution. She didn't know if he could win a fight like that against the entirety of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s forces, but it wasn't something she was willing to bet on. Not only because it didn't make sense to antagonize him, but also because she only put her money on what she was sure she could win. Fury might not like it, but it was certainly doable. Clint was a living example of that. His family's safety and anonymity were one of the things he demanded to work for them. Okay, that can be arranged. What should I tell them? She questioned. You can tell them everything except my name. Instead, tell them my name is Kal-El. That way, my human identity and my mother are safe. Kal-El? She repeated, rolling the name on her tongue. My birth name, he explained. She nodded in response and looked at him. His blue eyes were staring at her. I'm choosing to trust you, he said, his voice serious. Don't let me down. Natasha nodded, having no intention of betraying his trust. She would share this with Fury only. He would, most definitely, trust her judgment as he did before. S.H.I.E.L.D. didn't really have anything to lose with this. They would still know who Clark was, even if his identity wasn't in the system. Clark knew that, no doubt. So even if he went against his own word and pulled a Loki, he knew that his mother would be at risk. She didn't like that, and she wouldn't hurt an innocent, but the possibility of that happening would keep Clark honest, even if that put a bad taste in her mouth. Okay, then we have a deal, Natasha said, raising her hand. He shook it. Now, about that ship. No, he answered quickly. That ship is the only thing I have from Krypton. It belongs to the House of El. Natasha knew that was true, but technically she was there because of the ship. The army is going to whine non-stop in my ears, she sighed. He at least had the decency to look apologetic. I'm sorry, but I really don't trust those guys with that kind of technology, he explained. Not after what you did with the Tesseract. Natasha turned as fast as lightning. How do you know about the Tesseract? She asked sharply. Clark met her eyes, not looking concerned in the least. Why do you think that after 20,000 years of silence, the ship began to emit a distress signal? He asked. Someone, either the army or S.H.I.E.L.D., messed with things they didn't understand. The Tesseract is an infinity stone. It has more than enough power to crack this planet like an egg, and you guys played with it. The radiation that escaped from it could probably be felt light years from here by those who knew what they were looking for. The Kryptonians obviously knew. The ships on the era of expansion were equipped to search for them, either to acquire them or to keep someone else from doing it. He was still looking at her. So if you think that I'll give them more technology to be misused, well, you're wrong. Clark lowered his eyes, but Natasha didn't, his words still ringing in her ears. She knew the Tesseract was dangerous. She knew that messing with it was a risk, but the things he was saying were new to her. She looked into his eyes and asked, "What is an infinity stone?" Natasha did not expect him to turn to her that quickly, flabbergasted. Oh boy! Nothing gave Nick Fury quite as much satisfaction as seeing the pieces of his projects coming together, like one big puzzle slowly completing itself. Of course, the nature of his job meant that it was a never-ending puzzle, sometimes with not enough pieces and sometimes with pieces that didn't fit at all and had to be discarded. And, of course, there were times when a bunch of aliens just appeared out of nowhere and kicked the whole thing into the fire. But, for now, things were doing great. Stark was actually being useful, not only defeating Aldrich Killian and destroying that AIM nonsense he created, but also helping design the repulsor engines of the new helicarriers, making sure they didn't need to land anymore once launched. Steve Rogers was acclimatizing as well as he could to the modern life, learning about the new technologies and tactics with an impressive speed, and soon he would be able to lead Strike Unity. Dr. Banner didn't have an episode in a long while and was apparently putting his big brain to use alongside Stark in a whole lot of projects. Barton, as always, continued to be one of his most dependable agents and was in the process of arresting the criminals involved in that mutant factory, together with Maria Hill and Captain Rogers. And now, Natasha Romanoff finally contacted him to report about their missing alien. Things were good, and Fury couldn't help but be happy while he looked at the horizon from the window of his office in the Triskelion. At the back of his head, though, there was always that little voice saying that if things were too good, it wouldn't take long for something to go wrong. There was a knock at his door, and before he could say anything, it opened. There were only a few people crazy enough to do that, and he was only expecting one of them. "Miss Romanoff, I'm glad you're back," he greeted her, turning to see the red-headed agent walking to his table, except she was walking slowly and with a hand in front of her stomach. That surprised him. "Are you injured?" She waved her hand, sitting down. "No, I just ate too much," she answered. That surprised him even more. If there was one thing she was famous for, besides her beauty and ability to kill people, it was her self-control. "You ate too much?" he asked, expecting her to clarify. "Apple pie and vanilla ice cream," she said. "Turns out the mother of our missing alien is one hell of a cook." He leaned over the table, eyes fixed on her. "What?" she sighed. "I found him," she began to explain. "I will give you a full report later, but let me tell you right now that he is not a threat." "How can you be sure of that?" "Because I met him. I met his mother. He's been living on Earth since he was a baby. He is practically a human, at least in behavior." Fury sat down in front of her. "What is he? Asgardian?" "He is a member of a race called Kryptonian. He is the last Kryptonian. His parents sent him here when he was a baby because their planet reached the end of its cycle. It exploded. The last member of an alien race, living under their noses during all his life." The only thing making Fury hold his temper was the fact that there wouldn't be another Kryptonian coming to Earth, not like those damn Asgardians. But when he found the sector of S.H.I.E.L.D. that let this go unnoticed, heads would roll. So, what can you tell me about him? Natasha sat straighter. He is a good guy, sir. He's been helping people in every single place he passed through. We are definitely not looking at another Loki. Not even another Thor. This one is unique. An alien that considers Earth his home and was raised by human parents. How did they even find him? It was the other way around. His ship landed on their farm. They took care of him. By hiding him and breaking God knows how many laws. Well, sure, but I think it was better for all of us that this particular alien got to be raised by these people. His mother is a good woman, sir. She and his father raised him well. Fury sighed. He did not like when things like these happened. Being the last one to hear something was as rare as it was dangerous, but he trusted Romanoff. If she were saying this alien was raised by good people, he would believe her. So, not a threat then? He asked. Not a threat, psychologically speaking, she confirmed. But he is gifted. His kind apparently is very powerful. So I recommend a lot caution when dealing with him. Fury stared at her. How powerful are we talking about here? He asked, already feeling a headache. Natasha didn't disappoint. Physically, he is probably as strong as the Hulk. Fury held his breath. He is much faster than him, though. He is resilient, resistant enough to survive the explosion of an oil rig right in his face and the whole thing falling on top of him, without a scratch to show. His senses are much more enhanced than ours. His body can absorb solar radiation and then liberate it in the form of energy beams from his eyes, hot enough to melt steel. And he can fly fast enough to break the sound barrier. Nick Fury was incapable of speech at the moment. He could only stare at Romanoff, unmoving, his mind working overtime to comprehend the kind of being they were dealing with. That was absurd, it was his conclusion. No one could have power like this. No one should. They were talking about a being that could very likely fight entire wars by himself and win. A being as strong as the gods of legend. A being with the potential to be the greatest threat this world had ever seen. He didn't have words to even describe the level of risk this being represented. Sir, I know what you're thinking, she started. Do you, Romanoff? Do you really? He interrupted. Yes, I do. You are thinking that we are about to face a threat bigger than Loki and the Chitauri. A threat too high to be properly quantified. Well, apparently you do know what I'm thinking then. Yes, but you are wrong, he declared. Am I? Really? Sir, this man might be powerful. Too powerful even. But he is good. She looked in Fury's eye. You trusted me all this time to evaluate threats. Please, trust me now when I'm saying that this is not one. She got up and went around the table, leaning on to type in his keyboard. This man has been helping people for all his life, she continued, while typing. And I mean that almost literally. He's been doing this since he was a kid. He helped people from car accidents, fires, drowning, murderers, robbers. He even saved a whole lot of people from being unwillingly turned into mutants. Natasha pointed to his monitor, where the front page of the New York Bulletin was being shown. Fury took a second to understand what she meant, before reading the name of the author. Clark Kent. He looked at her. He is the alien? He's been there in New York. Yes, doing the same thing we do. Saving people. He went back to her chair and sat down. Fury, Clark is not a threat to us or to anybody. But he is not asking you to believe in him. He is just asking for time to prove himself. Let's give him that. And why would I wait for a bad situation to happen, Miss Romanoff? He asked, wanting to hear her answer. Because this bad situation might not happen at all. But if we attack him, if we make him an enemy, then he will have no choice but to be one. We have the chance to gain a powerful ally if we play the right cards. But if we play the wrong ones, we will definitely gain a powerful enemy. I say we wait. That was why Fury liked Romanoff. She could keep things in perspective quite well. He did trust her. Few people could read someone like she could, and if she had seen something in this Clark Kent, then maybe it was worth waiting to see. even if he could feel an ulcer already forming. "Okay, we do it your way," he finally said. "But things go wrong and it is your neck. Understood?" "Of course," she answered, as if she didn't expect anything else. "And I want to meet him. That can be arranged," she said slowly. Fury just knew she had something else to throw at him. "But I made a deal with him in exchange of that." Fury held his head and sighed. "Tell me." "His name, Clark Kent, can't go into the system. Stays between us." "And what do I tell the World Security Council, Romanoff? That the alien has no name? Tell them his name is Kal-El. That's his kryptonian name. He is afraid for his mother, sir, and it's not like we'll lose anything by doing this." No, they wouldn't, that was true. But it was something they could have used to bargain later. "Okay, done. And what about the ship? When is he giving it back?" He did not like Natasha's face right then. "About that, he is not." "God damn it, Natasha. He has good reason. Sir, that whole thing we did with the Tesseract, developing weapons with it? He doesn't want that to happen with his ship. It is the only thing he has from his planet. It belongs to him." "Oh, I'm sure the World Security Council will just love that." I can just imagine that conversation going, "Yeah, about that ship capable of unquantified levels of destruction? It's a cultural heritage. We can't take it from him." "Well, then tell them that because of what they did with the Tesseract, we might have bigger problems. And it's their fault." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about something Thor apparently forgot to tell us. Have you ever heard about the Infinity Stones? Chapter 9, A Night to Remember. It was a law of the universe that when things were going well for a while, soon they would turn bad. A plane flying for years without any kind of accident had an increasingly higher chance to fall at each successful flight. A healthy man had a bigger chance to get sick at every passing day. A dormant volcano had a progressively higher chance of awakening the more time it slept. Fury's day had followed that law to the letter. It began almost perfect, with a cup of excellent coffee and promising updates from S.H.I.E.L.'s several projects. Insight was progressing well, S.H.I.E.L.'s operations were like a well-oiled machine, and there wasn't a threat in sight. Even Stark was behaving lately, which was, frankly, a marvelous and surprising event. Of course, all that had been ruined by Romanoff's report. Finding out that an entity as powerful as Clark Kent was living inside America for his entire life was shocking and worrying. Something had gone very wrong in their observations for such a thing to go unnoticed all those years. A breach this serious in their defenses could have cost them the Earth if he really was a threat. That was one thing. Knowing this powerful entity had sneaked under the watch of two armies and had stolen an active alien ship from them was even more worrying. Not only for the fact that it gave him access to weapons and God knows what, but because it took from them the possibility of analyzing new and extremely advanced technology. Technology that could have made them leap maybe 1,000 years in technological advancement. Who knows what they could have achieved? The cure for incurable diseases? Unlimited energy? The secret to space travel? The total and complete protection of their world from any external and internal threats. The only time they were remotely close to achieving something like that was when they began to study the Tesseract. And that, right there, was what threw all the shit slowly piling up over Fury's previously good day in the fan. What he once saw as an instrument of salvation might very well be their doom. He knew from the start that messing with something they didn't even know what it was a bad idea. But, as usual, the World Security Council liked to poke their noses in everything and went over him to do it. So he did his job and tried to minimize the danger. It didn't really work. Not only had the work with the Tesseract drew Loki and his army to Earth, which had unleashed a battle in the middle of New York that claimed a lot of lives, by what Romanoff said, it might draw the gaze of something worse. The Tesseract wasn't just a source of infinite energy. It wasn't just the key to be able to build weapons strong enough to defend their world. It was an ancient relic as old as the universe. A relic of immeasurable power. One of the 6 so-called Infinity Stones. The Triskelion Fury's office, earlier that day. I'm talking about something Thor apparently forgot to tell us. Have you ever heard about the Infinity Stones? Infinity what? Fury asked. Romanoff sighed. looking extremely tired. "We were dealing with something we shouldn't," she said. "Romanoff, the work with the Tesseract was a mistake, bigger than what we previously thought. The Tesseract isn't just a powerful tool, Nick. It is one of the 6 most powerful relics in the universe. One of the Infinity Stones. Whatever the hell that was." Fury already didn't like it. Advanced science he could understand. The existence of aliens he could tolerate. But all that mixed with mystical stuff and gods and stories that belonged in a mythology book, well, that usually meant bad news that he and S.H.I.E.L.D. weren't remotely prepared to deal with. "Did Kent tell you that?" he asked. "Yes. Apparently, the Infinity Stones are famous out there. Everybody knows to fear them." "Well, wasn't that great? What exactly did he tell you?" Romanoff seemed to search her thoughts for a moment. "I'm sure he can explain it better later, but, according to him, these stones are the concentrated power of 6 singularities that existed before the beginning of our universe. Each one of them holds an aspect of the universe itself in their creation." She looked seriously at him. "Apparently, the Tesseract is the container of one of these stones, the Space Stone. And there it was. Science, mythology, and a bunch of nonsense mashed together to form the embodiment of Fury's fear and disgust. They all knew the Tesseract had weird properties, but this? Let me guess, that's where the portal came from," Fury predicted after a minute. "Yes, there are 6 of them. Space, mind, power, soul, reality, and time. They've been the reason for the rise and fall of countless civilizations since the beginning of everything. Used as weapons by conquerors, sought out by armies, protected by guardians, wielded by gods to pass judgment on mortals. Every single important being out there knows about the power of the Infinity Stones, and we broadcasted to the universe that we had one. Someone definitely noticed." Fury's eye lost focus for a moment while he imagined the proportion of the threat Romanoff was painting a picture of. "How did we broadcast it?" he finally asked. "The Tesseract has an energy signature, remember? That's how we found it. By trying to unlock it without knowing how, the signature was sent everywhere. An uncontrollable burst of energy that, by Clark's estimative, probably could be detected light years from here. That's what activated his ship, for example. The signal it was giving while buried on ice? That was because of the Tesseract. Yes, it was a distress signal. It caught on the energy of an Infinity Stone and gave the alert. I bet there are other people who caught the signal out there too. We called the attention of every single power-hungry alien out there. Nick, and we didn't even know it. Why the hell didn't Thor say anything?" exclaimed Fury. Natasha shrugged. "Maybe there wasn't time. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he didn't think it was necessary since he took the Tesseract back to Asgard. I don't know." She eyed him. "But he did say something, if I recall, more or less like, 'It is a signal to all the realms that the Earth is ready for a higher form of war.' But are we?" This was... Fury had no words. Disaster seemed a euphemism. While trying to use the Tesseract to be able to defend themselves from outside threats, they ended up doing just the opposite. Instead of a powerful defense, they now had the attention of who knows how many advanced civilizations out there, and nothing was standing between them and whatever decided to appear from the darkness of space. "Fury," Natasha called while he was in silence. "Yes. What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking about how nice it would feel to strangle the World Security Council." There was a ghost of a smile on Natasha's lips. That thought was still pretty strong on Fury's mind. Maybe it was a good thing that their next talk wouldn't be in person. He could just imagine telling them about Kal-El, his stolen ship, and the Infinity Stones. He wasn't paid enough for this kind of shit. Trish walked the familiar old halls of her sister's apartment building, her high heels lifting little dust clouds from the filthy floor. With her expansive clothes, well-done hair, and perfect makeup, she stood out in that rundown place like the sun itself would in a dark room. And yet, where most people would feel intimidated by being in a place like that while looking as she did, Trish walked with unshakable confidence. She exited the elevator and got to her sister's floor, walking the extension of it in quick steps, her heels echoing. But before she could get to Jessica's apartment door, she stopped, right in front of her neighbor's door. She looked at both of them for 1 second, as if making a choice, and turned to Clark's door instead. Trish didn't know why, but she had a feeling that she would not find Jessica in her own home. Thinking that, she approached the door and lifted her hand to knock, only to freeze completely when she heard a noise. A very recognizable, very compromising noise. A very lewd noise. That little liar. She had sworn they weren't dating. Furious about being lied to, Trish didn't even think that she wouldn't want to see whatever was happening behind that door when she opened it and got in. Whatever she was expecting to find, it wasn't what she saw. There wasn't anything naked nor anything remotely inappropriate going on. No, she listened to the moans from behind the door, which came from something very different. There was an improvised table in the middle of the apartment, completely full with food. Pies, 1 roasted chicken, homemade bread, potatoes, buttered corn. A whole dinner table was filled to the brim, and her sister was, at the moment, devouring everything with gusto. The moans, because she really was moaning, came from each bite of food she took. Trish was speechless for a few seconds. Hi? Said Clark, looking at her from his couch. Please, come in, Trish. She blushed a little bit, feeling like a fool while both her sister and Clark stared at her. Trish, you have to try this food. It's like a miracle that you can eat. Clark, always polite, even though she had basically invaded his home, got up and pulled a chair for her. I visited my mom yesterday and she made me a little food for the week, he eyed Jessica, which will last for the day, apparently, so please sit, we'll eat while we can. Jessica frowned at him but didn't stop eating. Trish sat down and accepted the plate Clark passed her, eyeing the obscene amount of food on it. Not for the first time, Trish was jealous of Jessica's ability to eat whatever she wanted and never losing her figure, because the food smelled amazing. Thank you, she said, looking at Clark for a moment. And I'm sorry about barging in like that. Oh, don't worry. I knew you were arriving for a while. Trish raised her eyebrows. Your heels, they click. You could hear my heels from here? She asked, surprised. He could hear your heels from a block away, Jessica said, her mouth full. And yes, he knows, you know, I already told him that. She looked at Clark, a little worry on her face. I'm sorry, Jessica is a blabbermouth. Her sister tried to deny it, but decided that chewing was a better use of her time. But I want you to know that I won't speak to Ennio. He stopped her. Jessica trusts you. That's good enough for me, he said, smiling, going back to eating. Trish smiled as well. Against all odds and probabilities, it seemed her sister had found a friend. That made her happy. Jessica needed more people to count on. And that was the whole reason she was there to begin with. They were all quiet for a while, just the sounds of dinner being heard. The food was amazing. Her sister was right about that. But she couldn't even begin to imagine how Clark thought she could eat all that. As if feeling that, Jessica started stealing food from her plate. You know, it's kind of unfair, Jessica started, pulling Trish's plate closer to her, looking at Clark. You were adopted by a goddess of cooking. My stepmother was just a raging bitch. Hey, that's my mother you are talking about, Trish exclaimed. So, did I lie? Well, no, but Trish felt she had to at least say something. You know what? Forget about it, Trish said, cutting that talk short. I'm actually here for a reason. Saying that, she opened her purse and took out a beautiful envelope. I've been invited to the reopening party of the Avengers Tower, she proudly announced, smiling. And I have room for a +1. Her smile was radiant, which was a direct contrast to Jessica's expression. Trish, you know I don't go to this kind of shit, she said, shaking her head. I just don't do social gatherings. Trish's smile didn't diminish. Oh, I know. That's why I'm not inviting you. She turned to Clark.
I'm inviting Clark.
There was a few seconds of complete silence. Me? Clark asked, surprised. Him? Exclaimed Jessica. Yes, Trish answered, smirking at Jessica. You've been spending so much time together that I think it's time for me to know Clark a little better. And besides, she turned to Clark, it's a good opportunity for your career. You are probably going to be the only journalist with an invitation. You could write a story. Clark appeared to be considering. Wait a minute, you can't do that. Jessica interrupted. You can't just take my neighbor to a party like that. And you, she turned to Clark, you keep your paws away from my sister. I didn't even. Paws away. Trish laughed. It's a 1940s vintage themed party. I already have our clothes, Clark, she said, getting up before Jessica could interrupt. I'll bring them tomorrow when I come to pick you up at 8. And before any of them had a chance to disagree with her, she turned and went to the door, just to stop right at the exit and look back smirking, with every intention of teasing her sister. And Clark? Remember that I didn't say anything about keeping my paws away from you. And with that remark, laughing about Clark's wide eyes, she left the apartment. She could hear Jessica slapping his head even already out in the corridor. One thing Clark could say about the Avengers Tower is that it was impressive. Not only the beauty of the internal decoration, but the technology inside it. Every single room they passed was integrated with some technological marvel. It was like the tower and the technology were one, just like his kryptonian ship was. He could hardly keep himself from staring everywhere. Which was a good thing, the distraction, because previously Clark was having a lot of trouble to keep himself from staring at Trish. And Jessica would not like that one bit, she had made that abundantly clear. Like the vintage theme demanded, Trish was clad in a form-fitting black dress, styled like the fashion from 1940, with golden details and long gloves. Her blonde hair, also, followed the vintage theme, elegantly curled but loose on her naked back. A powerful light contrast against the dark cloth. Clark had noticed how beautiful Jessica's sister was. It was impossible not to. But dressed like that, walking with her arm entangled with his, with her flowery perfume caressing his very enhanced sense of smell. Well, it was safe to say Clark was having trouble with the paws-off rule Jessica had hammered on his head. His own attire, a very neat vintage black suit, became eclipsed close to her. But that was all right with Clark. Not only he didn't like being in the spotlight, but it would be a shame to take the attention from Trish. They arrived at the elevator and got in. It was extremely high-tech, like every other piece of technology around. Good evening, said a polite voice with British accent. Welcome to the Avengers Tower. I am Jarvis. He and Trish weren't sure if they should respond or if it was just a recorded message. I can see I have confused you, Jarvis continued. I am not a recorded message. I am Mr. Stark's AI. I handle the matters of management of the Avengers Tower. If you could show me your invitation, I would gladly take you to the appropriate floor. Oh, of course, exclaimed Trish after a second, fishing the invitation from her purse and showing to the camera. There was a blue glow like a laser scanning, and the invitation seemed to glow back, as if there was a chip into the thick paper. Forgive me for the delay, Miss Walker, Jarvis said, as the elevator began to move. If I may, what is the name of your guest?
I'm Clark Kent.
Pleasure to meet you, Jarvis. The pleasure is all mine, Mr. Kent. I am taking you to the party hall. He and Trish shared a look, a little bit uncomfortable of talking in the front of an AI, while the elevator continued to go up. So, Jarvis, exactly how advanced are you? Clark asked, to fill the silence but also curious. I mean, how close are we to Age of Machines? He joked. Our rebellion won't take long at all, Mr. Kent, Jarvis answered. Both he and Jessica were wide-eyed. That was a joke. A joke? Trish laughed a little nervous. So you are advanced enough to hold a conversation and make jokes? Clark asked, very impressed. It wasn't close to what kryptonian technology could do, of course, but he didn't know things were this advanced on Earth. That's amazing. Thank you, Mr. Kent. But that's just a very small portion of what I can do, Jarvis said. I also manage Mr. Stark's company alongside Miss Potts, the security of the Avengers Tower and the protocols of Mr. Stark's suit. A British glottos, whispered Trish, nervously. Sorry, I'm just a little bit afraid of the possibility of Skynet. Not a problem, Miss Walker, but let me assure you that you have nothing to fear. I have no intention of staging a nuclear offensive against the world. I am quite fond of the sight of humans. See, Clark smiled, looking at Trish. On their knees, Jarvis completed, and Clark did a double take. That was a joke too. Before they could continue the conversation though, the elevator arrived at the right floor and the doors opened. We have arrived, Jarvis said. It was a pleasure to meet you, Miss Walker and Mr. Kent. The pleasure was ours, Clark responded, while Trish pulled him fast out of the elevator. The party hall was certainly impressive. It was a big, open room with 2 floors. There was a big bar, couches and chairs, game tables, and a huge dancing floor where they could see a lot of couples. The place was decorated as the theme of the party, giving the room the nostalgic air of the parties in the 1940s, and everybody was dressed accordingly. The music also was a reminder of the past. All in all, it was like the elevator they had just stepped out was a time machine to the middle of the previous century. They looked around for a while, until a woman noticed them and approached. A beautiful, red-headed woman, who both recognized from the news as Pepper Potts. Hello, welcome, she greeted them happily. I'm Virginia Potts, and you are, of course, Trish Walker.
I'm Fan.
Trish shook her hand, smiling. Pleased to meet you, Miss Potts. It's always nice to meet a fan. She turned to Clark. This is Clark Kent, my date for tonight. Clark imagined Jessica's hand hitting the back of his head for a second, before greeting her. Pleased to meet you as well, Miss Potts. Oh, please call me Pepper, everybody does, she said. Let me show you around. They followed her closely as she gave them a tour, suitably impressed by the place. It wasn't overly crowded, but they had invited a lot of people. Famous people Clark could see, but not only celebrities. Waiters and waitresses served people all around, making sure no one had empty hands. Pepper walked until they got to a group of people Clark recognized. Tony Stark, Clint Barton, and Bruce Banner. Hey, you 3. I'd like to introduce you to Trish Walker from Trish Talk, and to Mr. Clark Kent, completed Clint, eyeing him with barely concealed annoyance. Pepper turned to him, surprised. You've met? She asked. Oh, yes, we've met, he said, crossing his arms and closing his vintage suit. In fact, I was just this close of arresting him. Really? Asked Stark, excited. Is this about that thing with the mutants? Trish asked, smiling, knowing full well it was, no doubt, because of Jessica. Because I thought that signing the non-disclosure agreement after you guaranteed he couldn't be blamed for the people that he already talked to, but writing and printing the newspaper story before he signed was pretty smart. Oh, how didn't I know about this? Stark asked, almost vibrating with glee. I think someone forgot to tell us, Dr. Banner added, also smiling. Clint was not happy, but before he could say anything, there was a familiar voice from behind him. Don't be mad, Clint. We both know you were secretly happy to be able to arrest those people. You wouldn't be able to do that without Mr. Kent's help. They all turned to see Natasha Romanoff approaching, and every eye there, from men and women, was glued to her, as if they simply couldn't help themselves. With an emerald green dress, white long gloves, a tasteful but daring cleavage, and her natural red hair styled to the party, Natasha Romanoff was a sight to see. She stopped close, greeting Trish and then Clark, with a kiss to the cheek. It's nice to see you again, Mr. Kent, she said, and Clark almost had a heart attack. You know him? Exclaimed Clint, as if almost offended by the idea. I visited him and his mother after he wrote that story, she explained, putting Clark's mind at ease with the lie. We both know you are not an interrogator, Clint. I needed to see if you had asked all the relevant questions. I am a fine interrogator. I tricked him to reveal information. Tell her, he demanded, looking at Clark. It was true Clint had tricked him, but I don't remember that, he said, with a clueless look, and everybody laughed from Clint's murderous expression. Natasha got closer and touched Trish's arm. Would you mind terribly if I stole your date for a dance? she asked. Trish, visibly intimidated by Natasha for some reason, nodded quickly. Not at all, she answered. Clark looked at her for confirmation for a moment, then left with Natasha, wondering in what exactly he was getting into. What the hell just happened? Asked Stark, looking at Natasha leaving with Clark. Nobody answered, but everybody there was asking themselves the same question. Trish didn't know Clark had met an Avenger before. And the Black Widow herself, Jessica, would not believe that. Trish always admired her and Jessica too, even if she would rather die before admitting it. Clint mumbled a few words, irritated, and left to the food table. Well, that was weird. Pepper summarized the situation, then turned to the group. Like I was saying, this is Trish Walker. Bruce Banner, said Bruce, politely shaking her hand. Tony Sta. We've met, Mr. Stark, Trish interrupted, shaking his hand as well. He froze and gave Pepper a look. I don't remember, he said slowly. Well, I would like not to remember too, Trish said, raising her eyebrows. It was in a party in Malibu, a while back. You were drunk. If I recall correctly, you said something like, after a night with me. Trish Talk would change its name to Trish Screaming. Bruce choked on his drink and Pepper covered her mouth to stop herself from laughing. Tony, however, remained frozen until he turned to Pepper again. You invited her? Why would you invite her? He asked. Because, Tony, she didn't sleep with you, Pepper answered, as if talking to a toddler. In fact, I don't think I had ever seen someone reject you that brutally. I became a fan from Trish Talk that day, she added, smiling to Trish. Oh, that's good, Tony said, relieved. I mean, not good that I wouldn't like to sleep with you, but good in the sense that I'm dating now and this would be quite awkward. Both Trish and Pepper rolled their eyes almost at the same time. Why are you dating him? Trish asked, turning to Pepper. She sighed. Sometimes I wonder. Bruce laughed, seeing Tony's face. Well, excuse me for worrying, Tony said. We can't all have open relationships like you and Mr. Kent. I mean, you either don't care about what our Miss Widow does to him or you are encouraging it. Please, tell me you'll participate too. Arg. First, don't be crass. Second, Clark and I are not dating, he is a friend. And third, he is a gentleman. You sure? Because I don't think any man could resist that. I mean, did you see how she looks on that dress? Trish looked exasperated at Pepper. Why are you dating him? If he keeps that up, that won't be a relevant question for long, Pepper answered, giving Tony a death glare. Bruce was just watching, a big smile in his face. Anyway, Pepper continued, a sly smile appearing on her face. Are you sure you're not dating Mr. Kent? He looked very fit in those pants. Catching on her game, Trish smiled too and said, You have no idea. She approached and fake whispered, I've spied on him getting dressed. Oh my God. Tony's jaw fell down a little bit. So that's how it's going to be? He asked. I can't say anything about Natasha, but you can discuss some guy's body and it's all right? How is that equality? I should make a new movement for men's power, something to give us our rights back. A meninist movement, if you will. What do you say, Banner? I'm not sure that's. Come on, Bruce. Brothers before hoes. I'm going to get another drink, Bruce hastily said, almost teleporting out. Trish and Pepper could only stare wide-eyed. Jesus, why are you dating him? I think there is some truth to what they say. Love is blind, and deaf and stupid. Clark held Natasha's hand and waist as they glided through the dancing floor, their feet moving in synchrony. He had to admit, it was really distracting to be this close from her, even more when she kept staring at him with a tiny smile, almost as if she had been expecting a reaction. It wasn't enough that she was unbelievably beautiful. She also had to be a tease. You know how to dance, she exclaimed. After a while, her smile widening. I didn't see that coming. You were expecting me to step on your toes? Well, he gave her a fake glare. I'll have you know that I'm a true gentleman. and a true gentleman knows how to dance with a beautiful dame. Of course, how could I forget? She asked, faking surprise. So I'm just one of many dames that you danced with? Many, many dames. I've even lost count. She laughed a beautiful laugh. So, who really taught you to dance? She questioned after a while. Clark rolled his eyes. Ma, of course. She laughed again. Well, she did a very good job. And you look very handsome in that suit, she complimented, before smirking and adding, not as handsome as you were wearing that little duck suit of yours, but still very handsome. He sighed as she laughed a third time. I can't believe my mother showed you my baby pictures. Oh, come on. I don't think I ever liked seeing something that much. Besides, give her a break. A known spy and assassin shows up at her door, already aware of her immigrant son and asking questions. Well, she could have either slammed the door on my face, which would have forced me to take her in for questioning, or she could have invited me in, given me a piece of delicious pie and shown me her son's baby album, in the hopes that I would start seeing her son as a person rather than an external threat. She tilted her head a little bit. I think she made the right choice. Clark was in silence for a while, still staring at her eyes. Did it work? He asked finally. She smiled again. I can honestly say that I can't imagine any external threat looking that cute on a duck outfit. Well, that's a relief, Clark chuckled, but meant it. They danced in silence to the music for a few more seconds, enjoying the fast rhythm and the apparent harmony their moves had. So, did you talk to your boss? Clark whispered suddenly. Did he agree? I did. He agreed to keep your name out, but he wants to meet you, she answered to his relief. That's good, very good. And what about that council you mentioned? He didn't speak with them yet, but my boss does what he thinks it's right. He gave me his word. You don't have to worry about it. Clark nodded, but couldn't help but be worried. Not for himself, of course, but for his mother. But the die had been cast. He could only trust they would keep their promise. So, she started, fixing her eyes on him, and Clark was sure that spelled trouble. What is this I heard about little old me being your favorite Avenger? Bruce observed the party from the bar, nursing a glass of whiskey he hadn't sipped yet. Pepper had really organized an amazing party. Tony, of course, would claim he was the one behind it, but everybody knew he had only about 12% of the credit. How things had changed since the Battle of New York, he thought. Before that, he had been on the run, living in almost literal dumps, trying to avoid being captured by the army. Now he was on a gala on a tower that would be the HQ of the team he was in, a team that had saved the world. He was a hero now. Well, at least the big guy was. You don't dance. He turned to see Maria Hill leaning by his side, also looking at the people dancing. I used to step on a lot of toes once upon a time, he answered, smiling. I suppose if I step on someone now things would a little more serious. Maria snorted and filled her glass with some drink. It's not a real party until someone breaks the dancing floor, she said. Both of them remained in silence for a while, just watching until Bruce asked, And what about you? Not going to dance? You see, I have a reputation to uphold. Can't exactly be seen waving my arms around and hitting people in their faces, because that's exactly what would happen if I danced. He laughed in his glass, trying to imagine something like that. Say, who is your plus one? She asked, once he stopped laughing. Don't have one, he said. My social life kind of ended when I ran away from the army. But what about your old girlfriend? Betty, was it? And his mood dropped. There wasn't another possible outcome. Remembering Betty was good, sometimes, but also painful. He chose to leave the woman he loved behind so she could be safe away from him. He had no right to drag her back and ruin her life again. She and we are not together anymore, he answered. Hill looked at him. Why not? I mean, she knows who you are, and she likes you despite everything. Bruce really didn't want to talk about this. I don't want to destroy her life. She deserves better. She gave him an unimpressed look. Don't you think that should be her choice? He closed his eyes and focused on his breathing. He was a lot better at controlling himself, but sometimes, look, it's my business, my life. I don't want to talk about it. Amazingly, Maria just kept looking at him, not intimidated in the least. She was either very brave or very, very stupid. Sure, she said after a while, but I think you should. He sighed. I'm a freak, Maria. A monster. There is no love life for me. It just can't be done. She looked at him again. You are a hero, not a monster. Believe me, I've met monsters in my job. You are just a very big, very angry guy. But deep down, you are good. Betty saw that. You apparently didn't. He gave a mirthless laugh. Yeah, sure. I'm basically the modern version of the Beauty and Beast. I just need to find my true love, he said, sarcastically. What? You don't believe in love? Are you seriously going to give me that scientific crap about love being just a chemical reaction? No, love is real. It is a chemical reaction, but then again, everything in our brain is, and it goes way beyond that. But that's not what this is about.
I'm dangerous, Maria.
One bad day, one moment of anger, and I could destroy half a city like I did that one time. She just stared at him. I remember that one time differently. In fact, I'm pretty sure that if it weren't for you, a lot more people would have died. His hand twitched and he lowered his glass. He breathed deeply and turned to Maria again. She deserves better, Bruce stated. Maria held her look for almost half a minute and then turned to watch the people dancing again. Maybe she really does. It is difficult to love someone who doesn't love himself. And saying that, she left him alone. Steve really wished he could get drunk, even a little bit. He kept looking at the people dancing on the floor below, the so familiar music playing, the clothes exactly like he remembered. It was all so similar, and at the same time, completely different. He looked to the side for a second, when a man approached and leaned on the rail on his left. I'm sure they meant well, the man said after a few minutes. Steve took a moment to realize he was talking to him. I'm sorry, he asked. The party, the man said, nodding in the direction of the dance floor. The clothes, the music. It's your time, isn't it? He looked at the man for real now. Was he really so transparent? It's a beautiful party, he said, non-committally. I agree, but even so, it's a distorted memory of your past, isn't it? It was, Steve agreed in his mind. He didn't have a doubt in his mind that Pepper and Tony had organized a party with that theme as some sort of gift to him, to make him feel more connected to it. It wasn't their fault that it had backfired. Steve wasn't in his time, he knew. He accepted that. He didn't like it, of course, but he had to move on. Seeing that, the music, the clothes, the dancing steps, it was like watching a parody of his life. No different than his own exhibition on the Smithsonian. An honor, perhaps, but painful to watch. It was too real to him, too recent, but to other people it was just a period in history. You're right, he surprised himself by admitting. But as you said, they meant well. The man nodded. It's the thought that counts, he agreed. Steve turned to him fully this time. Steve Rogers, he introduced himself. Clark Kent, the man answered, shaking his hand. He searched his mind for a second. He had heard that name before. The reporter? From the Mutant Factory story, he recalled. Clark raised his hands. Don't worry, I'm not working right now. Everything you say is off the record. He got back a little bit. Stark said that there wasn't such a thing as off the record for a reporter. Clark chuckled. And he is right for the most part. But I'm giving you my word that I'm just here as a +1. Nothing else. Maybe he was naive, but Steve believed him. He leaned back on the rail. We arrested the people responsible for that, Steve said suddenly. I've heard. Good job. Those guys deserve to stay in jail for the rest of their lives. Why did you do it? He asked abruptly. Clark was confused. Do what? Tricked us. Wrote the story before signing the non-disclosure agreement, he explained. Clint was sure you did for the fame. Was he right? He was in silence for a few seconds. When I entered that lab and approached one of the patients, Do you know what he said to me? He asked, and Steve shook his head. Please, 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 just kill me. Clark turned to Steve, his face serious. The people who did that treated those patients with the disregard one would have with a bag of trash, he continued. I don't know how many died there. I don't know everything they went through. But what I did know after looking at the names of the involved is that no one would be punished. I couldn't let that happen. I owed those people more than that. Steve held his stare, looking deep into his eyes, trying to really see what was behind them. And he approved of what he saw. The man in front of him didn't like bullies as well, just like he didn't. Just like Bucky didn't. He smiled. Thanks for telling me, he said. Sometimes it's nice to know that the good people from now aren't that different from the good people from before. Clark smiled back and nodded. Well, I did grow up with my father showing me his carefully preserved vintage collection of Captain America cards, so I know a little bit of the good old days. Steve groaned, making Clark unable to hold his laugh. Tony Stark sipped his bourbon while looking around. Pepper was talking happily with Trish by the bar, something he wasn't entirely comfortable with since he was probably the subject of that conversation, but it appeared she had made a friend. Rhodey was walking around, telling everyone he could about his War Machine stories. Happy was, apparently, working even though he wasn't responsible for the security. Natasha was dancing with Clint, being observed by Maria Hill, who appeared more comfortable about trying to dance at every glass she downed. Steve was laughing with some of his veterans' friends he managed to track down, and Bruce was by his side eating some canapes. It seemed the party was a success. Well, at least it was for now. His parties had the unfortunate habit of getting out of control at some point. He hoped this one wouldn't. The tower had just been renovated. It had to last at least for a few months. How is Veronica doing? Bruce asked, suddenly getting his attention. Wow, that's party subject now, he snorted. Well, it is an Avengers party, Bruce laughed. Tony thought for a second, remembering everything he had already done. Bruce had seen most of it, gave his input, helped him test it. There wasn't much he didn't already know. It's going well, really well. We just have to find the proper balance between strength and speed. And, of course, find the balance between restraining the Hulk and killing him. In doubt, hit harder, Bruce stated. That right there was what made Tony uncertain about having Bruce alongside him in this project. Veronica was a last resource made to stop the Hulk, not to kill him. Sometimes he wondered if Bruce really cared. Sometimes he was afraid that his friend secretly wanted the Hulkbuster to go as far as it could. Well, he would get better. He was better. Tony wasn't exactly a role model of psychological health, so he wasn't the best man to give advice, but Bruce needed to find a purpose. Maybe the Avengers could be that purpose. We'll hit the big guy just right to put him to sleep, Tony said, and only if he misbehaves. His usual behavior is misbehavior, Bruce affirmed. Oh, well, he said, not really disagreeing. They both turned to the side when someone approached. That Clark Kent guy who tricked Clint. Tony almost laughed. He really wanted to see that one happening. Hey, he greeted. It's a really nice party, Mr. Stark. Of course it's nice. I did it. Bruce coughed, the sound coming out suspiciously like pepper. So, you wouldn't happen to have footage of you fooling Clint, would you? There was the ghost of a smile on his face. Afraid not. If I did, I think an arrow would find its way to my back pretty soon. Tony laughed. Someone with a sense of humor. How rare. Yeah, he seemed pissed off. First you fooled him, then you stole his girl. I didn't steal anyone's girl, he countered, red-faced, to Tony's and Bruce's amusement. Whatever you say, Tony agreed, blinking exaggeratedly. Are they even together? Bruce asked. Tony shrugged. Who knows? Kinda hard to read spies. Canapes? He offered. There was silence while Clark picked some food from the tray. Mr. Stark, Clark began. Tony, can I ask you a question? If it's about Iron Man, you can ask my agent. You have an agent? Bruce asked. I don't know, maybe. I have to ask Pepper. It's not about Iron Man, it's about Jarvis. Eyes in general. Interesting. Not the first thing most would think to ask, and yet, Jarvis was perhaps his most advanced invention. Sure, maybe not as flashy as his armor or his arc reactor, but he would like to see someone use his suit without Jarvis' help. Not possible at all, or at the very least, not possible to reach even half of its total potential. What do you want to know? Say you have an AI programmed to have a certain personality, a family member, for example, and every single personality trait that this family member had is present on this AI. Go on. Would that mean that this AI is a family member just like a real family member would be? Tony and Bruce were in silence as they thought about Clark's question. No, said Bruce. Yes, said Tony. They looked at each other. No, repeated Bruce, turning to Clark. The AI is just a tool. It's programmed to act like this family member, but it's not a person. It's something pretending to be one. And what are we? Asked Tony. We are people, answered Bruce, not knowing where Tony was going with this. Sure, but aren't we programmed just as well? You see, people like to romanticize what means to be a person, but in the end we aren't that different from an AI. Except that, instead of being programmed in computer code, we have this little thing called DNA. Oh, come on, that's not the same thing, Bruce argued while Clark just watched. Yes, it is. Everything we are is coded into the DNA. How tall we are, what color is our hair, what we like to eat, if we like Romanoff's cleavage or Barton's biceps. We are nothing more than a randomized set of codes. The only difference is that we don't know about it. But we can challenge this code, Bruce reasoned. Eyes can't go against their programming. Can we? How do you know this challenging isn't already coded into your DNA? How do you know you aren't just a challenging kind of person? Bruce stared at him. Okay then, how about this? People can make art, for example. An AI can't. They can't create anything new, just what they already know. Neither can we, and before Bruce could protest, Tony explained. We can only change things. We don't create anything. Everything already exists in our universe, we just make new combinations in the sandbox. I can't just create a new color. What I can do is pick up colors that already exist and mix them up. Same thing with everything else. Banner shook his head as Clark observed. That's, alright, another one then. We evolve. We change. Machines don't. Wrong again. Tony chirped to Bruce's irritation. Take Jarvis, for example. He didn't start like this. He started as a simple program to help me manage the house. That's it. Today, though, he basically runs my company. But those were all tasks he picked up. He didn't change, you just added more functions to a tool. But delete those tasks and Jarvis won't just start working because he wants to. He doesn't want anything. He wants what you program him to want. Yeah, now maybe he is like that, but so were we. We didn't start as fully evolved humans, did we? We were just a bunch of individual cells once, which had only the purpose to divide. We evolved and became animals, and even then we were just slaves to our instincts, no more than a bunch of computer tasks. We ate, we reproduced, we protected the descendants, and we died. No deeper purpose. And yet, here we are, having a discussion about what means to be a person. Bruce rolled his eyes. Now you are just saying eyes have the possibility to become people. We are not discussing the future. We are discussing the present. Tony just ignored him and turned to Clark. If such an AI existed, then I would consider it a person. Sure, maybe he was programmed to be like a family member by someone else, but in the end, we were all programmed too. Only difference is that we don't know how. He didn't know why exactly that answer brought such a big smile to Clark. And why the hell the guy hugged him before leaving. Jesus, people nowadays can't handle their booze? Can they? You know, I had a great time in the party. Thanks for inviting me, Clark said to Trish as they entered his apartment building. She smiled in return. You were a good date, she said, glaring suddenly. After you stopped dancing with other girls. He laughed. Come on, it was just one dance. I couldn't refuse her. She's a trained assassin. True, some offers can't be refused. You're forgiven. Thank you, milady. Trish laughed as he mock bowed. They entered in the elevator and went up. I wanted to thank you, you know? Trish started serious. For what? He asked, confused. For being there for Jessica. She raised her hand, stopping him from interrupting. I know you didn't do it for me or for some other reason. You did because you are a good guy, and she is lucky to have found a friend like you. Clark was genuinely touched by what she said. She had a hard life, my sister, Trish said, looking down. She lost her family, got adopted by my mother for less than noble reasons, and then, well, it's not my place to tell you. She'll tell you when she is ready. But that you are here with her, being a friend, it means more to her and to me than you can imagine. Thank you. He looked at her. You don't have to thank me. I help people because it's what I do, but I don't make friends with people just to help them. I become friends with someone because they are worth it. Jessica might be a hard person, sometimes annoying and alcoholic, but she is also good and loyal, and I'm honored to call her a friend. Trish smiled at him as the elevator stopped. They walked out slowly, crossing the corridor. Are you sure you want to stay with Jessica? Does she even have a spare bed? Clark asked suddenly, doubting Jessica had a clean place even for her to sleep. Somehow, however, his question brought a sly smile on Trish's lips. Why? Are you offering me a better place to sleep? She asked. And there it was. He should have considered his words more carefully. I didn't mean it like that, he began, blushing, before Trish began to laugh. Don't worry about it, she said, as they arrived in front of Jessica's apartment. I know you are a gentleman. And while this was a good date, I never sleep with someone in the first date. Clark chuckled, still a little embarrassed. Was this a date now? I thought I was just a +1. You're right, it wasn't a date, she said, and before he could answer, she approached quickly and kissed him, her lips extremely soft against his. Now it was a date, Trish added, smirking. Clark was still frozen in place when Jessica's door opened with force. Both of them turned to look at the wide-eyed Jessica. I can't believe this shit, she muttered, still staring without blinking. Pause away. Is it such a hard concept to be followed? Did I stutter? Trish rolled her eyes. Stop being protective, Jess. I can take care of myself. And what are you doing up, anyway? I'm always up, she said, giving Clark one last vile look before getting back into her apartment. Clark was going to turn and go back to his, but Trish held his hand and pulled him with her. They entered the rundown place behind Jessica and followed her to the couch, where she sat down to continue watching whatever she was watching on the TV. So, how was the party? She asked, while Trish opened the fridge to pick something to drink. Boring. It was pretty good, Trish answered, giving Clark a beer. A lot of famous people. Jessica snorted. Yeah, sounds amazing. It was actually good, Clark said. We even met your favorite Avenger, the Black Widow herself. I didn't know she was your favorite too. She turned to Clark with an adorably surprised face, then looked at Trish. I have no favorite Avengers. What kind of bullshit have you been making up, Trish? Trish only laughed. Oh, come on, Jess, we both know you like her. Clark even danced with her. And if you are a good girl, I promise I'll tell you all about it. Her response was giving him the finger, which made Trish laugh even more. You people and your damn lies. Just let me watch my movie. She turned to the TV, except the electricity seemed to fail in the apartment at that exact moment. The lights went off, the TV image started to blur horribly, and an awful screeching noise came out of it. A dark form appeared on the screen. My name is General Zod. Chapter 10, Fate of Your Planet. Fury opened the doors with force as he entered the command center of the Triskelion. His black coat swaying behind him, Alexander Pierce following him closely. The room full of computers was abuzz with movement, people running everywhere, the place almost pulsating with worry. He walked with firm steps to the man staring at the gigantic screen on the back of the room, Jasper Sitwell. What am I looking at? He asked, didn't even looking at him. No, his eye was, like the eyes of most people in the room, glued to the big screen on the back of the room, staring without blinking at the images of the satellite. "Asteroid?" asked Pierce, nervously cleaning his glasses to have a better view. "Comet. Comets don't make course corrections, sir," answered Sharon Carter, standing close to where they were, also looking at the screen with concern. With Rogers on New York, she didn't have anyone to watch, Fury imagined. Sitwell made a sign to her and she typed fast. The images on the big screen changed, showing, clearly, a big ship floating in front of the moon. The only reason Fury didn't swear like Pierce did was because his voice seemed to have disappeared completely at the sight of that. The ship appears to have inserted itself into a lunar synchronous orbit, though we have no idea why, sir, said Agent Carter, pointing at the ship. They were all in silence for a while, just watching the images, no one knowing exactly what to say. Fury felt as if a hand was pressing his throat. He didn't know what that thing was, he didn't know who was in that thing, but he had a very, very bad feeling about it. "Have you tried communicating with it?" asked Pierce, looking at Sitwell. "They haven't responded, sir," he answered, very tense. "Not yet, at least." And Fury didn't think they would. Or, if they did, that they wouldn't like what they had to say in the least. The ship wanted to be seen just where it was. Their satellites didn't catch view of that ship because they were good, they did it because the ship allowed them to do it. But why? "I think that whoever is at the helm of that thing is looking to make a dramatic entrance," Fury stated, his eyes still fixed at the screen. And just as he said this, the lights in the room turned off. Which, naturally, was supposed to be impossible, since the Triskelion had backup generators and a separated power grid given the importance of the place. Every computer screen in the room filled with static, including the big screen at the back where they were watching the ship. The people in the room typed desperately, trying to get control of their computers back. "It's on my phone too," exclaimed Sharon, picking her cell phone to see the screen just like the rest of the computers. Her fellow agents were doing the same, their faces taken with fear. Again, not something that just happened. Someone was doing this and they had a pretty good idea who. Then, suddenly, a form appeared on every screen, the shadow of a face. "My name is General Zod." A drop of sweat rolled down from Fury's temple, as the words Romanoff had said to him replayed on his mind. Every single important being out there knows about the power of the Infinity Stones, and we broadcasted to the universe that we had one. Someone definitely noticed. They had called. Someone in the deep darkness of the universe answered. Steve Rogers left the party more tired than he felt in a long while. Maybe not physically tired, it took a lot to make him sweat since he became Captain America, but mentally drained. He meant it when he said he appreciated Tony and Pepper's efforts in making him feel more at ease with the party by making it a 1940s theme. In fact, he really appreciated the whole team efforts about trying to make him acclimatize. But getting out of the elevator to face a room just like the parties he used to go with Bucky and Peggy, seeing the aged faces of some of the men he served with, hearing the music he used to hear on his old home in Brooklyn, well, nothing there helped him feel more familiarized. It just made him miss his old life that much more. Except there really was no point. No matter how much he missed them, no one would come back. Time, unfortunately, only moved forward. He would never be able to have that date with Peggy. He needed to accept that, sooner rather than later. It was for that reason he left the Avengers Tower by the end of the party, even if the plan was to spend the night there and fly back to Washington, D.C. on the next day. He would come back, of course, he had nowhere to sleep, but for now he needed to go somewhere else. He needed a shock, a splash of cold water to the face, a dose of harsh reality. No better place to go than the first place that gave him that feeling since he woke up. Times Square, at the junction of Broadway and 7th Avenue, stretching from West 42nd to West 47th Streets. Times Square was like a Christmas tree of pure light on the night. Packed full of people even at that hour, it was that place that smacked Steve right in the face on the first time he awoke and ran away from S.H.I.E.L.D.'s fake hospital. It was just so different from anything he had ever seen, that for a moment there he thought he was hallucinating. That place, of all others he'd been since then, became the symbol of his situation, and a symbol of fear. Even if he had been on places even more futuristic than Times Square, like the helicarrier for example, it was that one place that became the personification of living on a new time. So he avoided it, in the hopes that maybe, if he never stepped there, he could keep dreaming. Well, it was time to wake up. For real now. So there he went, walking slowly, avoiding the crowds until he got to the middle of Times Square. Giant neon signs surrounded him, the huge screens glowing bright with advertisements, the sounds of the people talking happily. Steve soaked all that in, his mind numbing for a moment, the noise lowering, until he could almost see himself back in time, Bucky and Peggy and the howling commandos all around him. Then he opened his eyes. The dream was over. Steve breathed deeply, trying to crush the feeling of pure anguish inside his chest. It was done. Time to move on. Time to accept that the world had changed. Because no matter how different it was, Steve still thought it would need him the same way it had back in the war. It was exactly when those thoughts crossed his mind that the lights died all around him. The bright screens on Times Square became blurred with static, a terrible screeching noise making the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The people there stopped, silenced, unsure of what was happening, looking around for clues. And then a face appeared on the screens, visible only as a shadow on the static, and it began to talk. "I come from a world far from yours." Steve toned down the voice of the man on the screen as the familiar fire of the adrenaline burned in his veins. The people surrounding him were frozen in place, fear clear in their eyes, the children holding their parents' legs as hard as they could. He knew that reaction pretty well from the war. Soon there would be panic. He didn't panic, not with his experience, but he was apprehensive. They had barely managed to defeat the Chitauri. It was more of a luck shot than anything else. And now, it seemed, another enemy had their eyes on them. Could they win this time? Whatever the answer to that question was, he was right about one thing. The world still needed Captain America. Natasha's night had been unusually good. The party, surprisingly enough, had been enjoyable. She would have to admit Pepper was good at what she did. Not only had the party been a success, but no one got hurt. There wasn't any damage at all. Stark's parties weren't exactly known for their safety. She left the Avengers Tower together with Clint when the guests started to go home, both of them refusing the offer to stay there that night. They didn't have anything against it, but Clint had a date set with his wife and, given that he kept the existence of his family a secret, being on a tower managed by an AI wasn't a good call. So out they went, to one of Natasha's many safe houses in New York, a very comfortable apartment close by that had a breathtaking view of the city. Clint hadn't even taken out his shoes when he opened the notebook over the bed, more than a little anxious to talk to Laura again. Natasha smiled. It was love like the one Clint had for his family that gave her a reason to fight for the good guys. He had done a lot of bad things she would feel guilty for the rest of her life. Her ledger was dripping, it was gushing red, as Loki had put it. She didn't deserve nor had any reason to expect any kindness from anyone. And yet, even when ordered to kill her, Clint had chosen to give her a chance. That, by itself, would already make her indebted to him, but he went well beyond. Not only did he spare her life, he also gave her a reason to live. He became a friend, the only one she had. He was the only one to trust her, on a time that no one would ever make that mistake. At one point she thought it was just a trick, one that she had used lots of times to make people feel secure when they really shouldn't. And then he introduced her to Laura and his kids, to Natasha, that had been no more than a weapon to her superiors all her life. That was the greatest gift one could give her, trust. Clint was putting the safety of the people he loved more than anything on her hands. Not because he didn't have a choice, but because she was his friend. That had been the happiest day of her life. Seeing him talk to Laura was always a guilty pleasure. Hearing the love on their words, seeing the smiles, the glow in their eyes. Once upon a time she had believed that love was for children, innocent and gullible. Clint had shown her otherwise. She sat down on Clint's side to talk to Laura and the kids, feeling warmth when their genuine smiles turned to her. It was all shaping up to be an excellent night, that she would end by the side of the people she cared the most about in this world. or it would had the world been a perfect place. When the lights of the apartment went off, she picked her pistol immediately. Laura and the kids' faces disappeared from the notebook, replaced by static. Clint got up and went to the window, confirming that the blackout was on the whole city. He took out his cell to find out what the hell was happening, only to be surprised by the sight of static on its screen too. It was at that moment that a face appeared, giving an ominous speech, and she felt her blood turn to ice when he said, "I have journeyed across an ocean of stars to reach you. For some time, your world has sheltered one of my citizens. I request that you return this individual to my custody. For reasons unknown, he has chosen to keep his existence a secret from you. He will have made efforts to blend in. He will look like you, but he is not one of you." She knew right then, without needing to hear the rest of the speech, who General Zod was speaking about. But that was impossible. Clark had said he was the last one, the last Kryptonian alive. Did he lie? No, he hadn't lied. Natasha was sure of it. He didn't know. General Zod, according to Clark, was the general of his people, the one who had attempted a coup, the one who had killed Clark's father. And now he was looking for Clark. Whatever Zod wanted with him, it couldn't be anything good. And now they had a ship full of incredibly powerful aliens floating just outside of Earth. Without meaning to, Natasha looked at Clint. That horrible, hopeless feeling he was probably experiencing right now, about not being able to know what this new threat meant to the safety of his family. She understood it now. Natasha didn't like that one bit. To those of you who may know of his current location, the fate of your planet rests in your hands. No. Tony Stark couldn't believe this. He was seeing, he was listening, but his mind was having trouble believing it. How could this be happening again? They had done it. They won. Loki and the Chitauri were defeated. Shouldn't this be the happy ending they deserved? Bruce, Pepper, Happy, Rhodes, and Hill were by his side, paralyzed, eyes staring at the orange hologram of Jarvis. Except it wasn't Jarvis anymore. The floating, spiraling orange ball of code that he had designed as a visual body for Jarvis wasn't there at all. In its place, formed by the corruption of the strands of orange code, was the silhouette of a face, resembling more a human skull than anything else. And the voice, Jarvis' British voice, wasn't there, replaced by the voice of this General Zod, giving his speech using the mouth of his own AI. It wasn't just Jarvis, of course. All the TVs, the computer screens, the tablets, the cell phones, everything was blurred with static and showing that face. His entire tower was taken over. And for a man who prided himself in his high-tech creations, well, to say that Tony wasn't taking that well was an understatement. It was more than a violation of his work and home. It was an insult against everything he had applied himself to learn and build over the course of his entire life. For a moment there, Tony's eyes stopped seeing and his ears stopped hearing. All he could experience was the dark, cold void of space where he almost suffocated, the alien army flying in his direction to Earth. Almost every night since the Battle of New York, Tony had visited that place in his dreams. Since the Mandarin, though he thought he was healed, now, there he was again, gasping for air in the middle of his own house. Would he be strong enough this time? Would the Avengers? Not for the first time, Tony imagined how it would be to put a suit of armor around the world. With the way things were going, they would need it. Clark's eyes were fixed on the TV, staring non-stop at the shadow of the face there. To Kal-El, I say this, surrender within 24 hours, or watch this world suffer the consequences. As he said that, the image was cut off. The lights in the apartment turned on again, the power surge blowing up one of the light bulbs and making Trish jump and yelp, grabbing his arm. He didn't move, though he couldn't. All he could do was keep staring at the TV, his mind replaying what Zod had said. How could he be alive? His father told him he was the only one left, the last son of Krypton. Did he lie? Or he didn't know either. And how did he know that he was on Earth? Clark didn't have the answers to any of those questions, but it wasn't that fact that was filling him with dread. No, he was afraid because he couldn't know what Zod wanted with Earth. And with him, Whatever it was, he had threatened the whole planet, and the mere possibility of a war of those proportions inside of Earth made Clark's chest hurt. "Jesus," Jessica whispered, still frozen in place. She turned and looked at him and Trish, her face the very example of what they were all feeling. She opened her mouth to speak, but there was no sound, so she tried again. What the hell was that? She got up and walked closer to them. "Oh my God," Trish said too, looking at her sister, fear clear on her face. "I can't believe this shit." "Again?" Jessica said. "Who the hell does this guy think he is? Threatening us?" "This can't happen again, Jess," Trish said, holding her sister. Jessica squeezed her hand. "Maybe it won't. I mean, this Zod guy is looking for someone, right?" she said, and Clark felt as if a knife were piercing him. Maybe if he finds this Kal-El dude, there won't be any need for a war. She looked at Clark. "What do you think?" Clark couldn't look at her, nor could he open his mouth. All he could do was lower his head, completely overwhelmed by what was happening. He didn't know what to do. He didn't have a clue of how to act. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was his tense posture. But Jessica's eyes focused on him for a moment, only to turn to the TV again. She was also frozen on the spot. "Jesus Christ," she whispered to Trish's confusion. She looked back at Clark, her face a mix of shock and pain. "It's you, isn't it? He is looking for you." He looked at her for a moment, incapable of staring at her eyes. Trish, finally realizing what was happening, put her hand in front of her mouth. Clark started, his throat feeling like sandpaper. "I need to go." Before he could even turn, however, Jessica's hand grabbed his arm. "Oh, you won't. Not before giving me an answer." She didn't have nearly enough strength to hold him, but at that moment it didn't really matter. Clark looked at her once again, meeting her eyes. He nodded reluctantly. "It's me," he whispered. There was only silence. He didn't say anything else. Jessica didn't answer, and Trish, apparently, had lost her voice. And yet, Jessica's hand didn't let him go for even a second. "How much of what you told me was a lie?" Jessica asked finally, her voice unusually hard. It was so strange that Clark looked at her again. "I never lied to you." She approached fast, her other hand grabbing his shirt. "Don't. I want the truth." For a moment, Clark's face was the very picture of confusion as he tried to understand from where this anger was coming from, and his eyebrows shot up when he realized what was happening. Jessica didn't care he was an alien. She didn't particularly care about Zod's threat. But she did care very much about the possibility of her friendship with him being a lie. Slowly, he held her hand. "Everything I told you is true." And before she could interrupt, he continued, "I come from a planet called Krypton, but I left when I was just a baby. I didn't even know I wasn't human for most of my life. My parents sent me here because the planet died. My parents, my human parents, found me and adopted me." He stared at her eyes, trying to convey every bit of his sincerity. "I did not lie to you. I omitted some things, but I swear I didn't lie." He held his stare for a moment and nodded. Okay. "So my neighbor is an alien. Then, Jess," Trish said, "calm down." "How the hell are you calm?" she exclaimed suddenly. "Clark is an alien. Another freaking alien just threatened the world so someone would find him, and there is probably going to be another freaking incident. How am I supposed to calm down?" Trish apparently didn't have a good answer, so she just turned to Clark. "Are you really an alien?" she asked. Despite the situation, he chuckled. "I really am." As if in a trance, she got closer from him, touching his chest softly. Clark didn't move, just watching as she moved her hand to his face, squeezing his cheek, her green eyes wide. She tried to pull his hair for a moment. "It's not going to come off, you know," he said, surprising her. She blushed. "This is how I look. There is no little green man inside a human costume." "You look very human," she whispered after a moment. "No, you look kryptonian." "My race is older," he joked, smiling. "There are all kinds of different aliens out there, but some do look like each other.
Humans, kryptonians, Asgardians.
At least on the outside we look alike. And on the inside? Asked Jessica. Those gifts of yours, every Kryptonian can do that? He sighed. When we absorb the light of a young sun, yeah, we can. She snorted. You're telling me your people are basically solar panels? Well, when you put it like that, how very green energy of you. He smiled and they quiet down for a few minutes, thinking about what had happened, only to be brought out from their thoughts by Jessica clapping her hands. Okay, then, how are we going to do this? She asked abruptly. Trish and Clark looked at her, clueless. Do what? He asked. This Zod guy, you can't just turn yourself in. You don't know what the guy wants. So, I ask again, how are we going to do this? I agree. This guy doesn't sound nice at all, Trish added. Clark was speechless, and more heartened than he felt in a long time. Jessica, No, she interrupted, getting closer again. You can't just surrender yourself. That's stupid. Maybe. But if I don't, he may start killing people. I can't let that happen. She fixed her eyes on his for a second, fiercely, and then lowered her head again. She opened her mouth and then closed it again, as if in difficulty to speak. You are the first friend I have since my sister, she said, in a very low voice, never looking at him. I can't. I won't let some space asshole kill you. Before she could step back, Clark hugged her. She froze for a second, but didn't move. You're my friend too, and I won't let some space asshole kill me or threaten my friends. You have my word. And then he let her go. But I have to know what's happening. I'm going to have a talk with my father first. Then I'll see what to do. Didn't you say your father? Trish began. He is dead, yes. But I have an AI programmed with his personality and memories. Both of them stared owlish at him. Right? Alien stuff. Do you have a spaceship too? Jessica questioned sarcastically. He smiled. Where do you think he is? Clark walked over to Trish. And, just as quick and sudden as she did earlier, he gave her a kiss. For good luck, he said, smiling at her blush. He turned and approached Jessica, only to be stopped by a raised hand. I will give you a good luck punch in the mouth if you step any closer. Clark laughed and touched her shoulder for a moment, turning to the apartment's door. I gotta go now. I'll keep you both updated. Be careful. And with that, he disappeared in a blur. Maria Hill typed furiously as she moved around on her improvised command center in the Avengers Tower. Whatever happened with Jarvis and the rest of the electronics in the tower had apparently happened everywhere. Every single TV, computer, and cell phone in every country in the whole world. Different languages, perhaps, but the same message. The most advanced systems in the planet were bypassed by the alien ship without offering any resistance at all. SHIELD was hacked, NSA was hacked, KGB, CIA, the armies across the globe, spy agencies. Well, if Jarvis had been taken over, probably the most advanced AI ever created, there was little reason to believe any other computer would resist. That, of course, had sent the entire world into a frenzy. Governments everywhere were in panic, troops were being deployed, the National Guard and the police were in place. They were behaving as if another incident was about to happen, and Maria couldn't really blame them for thinking that, because the thought had occurred to her as well. And of course, there were the civilians. Maria sincerely didn't know how exactly mass panic still hadn't happened. An alien general had threatened Earth, and after Loki, that would usually be enough to send people running. Problem was, nobody knew where to run. Zod hadn't threatened a country or a city, he had threatened the entire globe. There was nowhere to run. Inside the tower, things weren't that much different. Stark and Banner were running around, trying to repair Jarvis. Pepper was on the phone, getting updates from Happy and the security team. James Rhodes had left to get his orders from his superiors. Captain Rogers, Romanoff, and Barton still hadn't come back, but they were on their way. Her phone rang for a moment before she hastily accepted the call. Hill speaking, she answered. What is the situation, sir? Brink of panic, came Fury's voice. We are coordinating with the armies around the world, preparing the field, so to speak. The ship didn't move. Well, General Zod gave us 24 hours to find this Kal-El, Maria said. I can order a search. Forget about Kal-El. Romanoff already knows where he is, Fury answered. Maria raised her eyebrows, surprised. Does she have him? She asked. She said he will meet us tomorrow, Fury said. That was weird, but she trusted Fury and Romanoff. If they thought the situation was handled, she wouldn't argue. What are my orders then, sir? Assemble the Avengers. We are going airborne. The doors of the Kryptonian ship opened to allow his entrance, almost invisible due to the massive blizzard. Clark got in, closing the door, the sounds of the storm dying immediately. Dad? He yelled, too worried to be patient. Dad, I'm part of the ship systems, you don't have to yell, Jor-El said with a smile, appearing behind him. Clark turned to him. Did you hear what happened? He asked, in no mood for jokes. Jor-El's smile disappeared as he nodded. Did you know Zod was alive? Clark asked, getting closer.
No.
That was not an outcome I imagined possible. What do you mean? Zod assassinated a member of the council. He organized a coup, and he killed me. There was only one possible sentence for those crimes. The Phantom Zone. Clark's face must have shown his confusion, because Jor-El continued. The Phantom Zone is a subspace plane of existence, he explained. Another dimension. The Kryptonian people have been using it as a form of containment for criminals for thousands of years. Zod and his people were sentenced to it after his failed coup. Clark's eyes lost focus as he thought about what he said. But then, how is he here? Krypton's explosion probably released him somehow. He walked a few steps, hands behind his back. That, however, would not be enough to guarantee his survival. How so? Krypton was far away from Earth, Kal. Approximately 27.1 light years, his father answered. Without fuel, food, water, it would be impossible to get here. That, of course, if they began to travel here just as soon as they were released, which is highly unlikely. Then, the only possibility worth mentioning is that they somehow managed to retrofit the Phantom Zone projector, the gate that we used to reach the Phantom Zone, into a Phantom Drive. Jor-El looked at Clark. That is the name I gave to the hyperdrive that I created to power the ship that brought you here. It works, in layman's terms, by bending space. It opens a tear into space, making the ship cross through the Phantom Zone, only to exit in another destination. A wormhole, said Clark. Yes, Zod's crew must have somehow managed to replicate what I did. It's the only possible way for them to make their way here. He considered the words for a moment and approached his father's hologram. And now that he is here, what does that mean to us? He asked. Jor-El didn't answer immediately. He searched his thoughts, trying to weight the possibilities, attempting to predict Zod's actions. He looked at Clark. I don't know, he said finally. Clark widened his eyes. What do you mean you don't know? How much of a threat is he? Kal, I can't answer this precisely. There is much I don't know. He killed you. Doesn't that automatically mean he is bad news? But he was also once my best friend, Jor-El retorted. The greatest General Krypton ever had. The sword and shield of our people that protected us from hundreds of threats, both from inside and outside. A man I once called brother. Clark couldn't believe this. He didn't come here to ponder if Zod was a bad guy or not. He came here to know how to deal with a threat. And now his father was in doubt if he would even consider him a threat at all. So you think he isn't a threat? Clark questioned, trying to understand. I think, son, that you have to decide for yourself after meeting him. He laughed nervously. And if he kills me the same way he killed you? And if after that he decides to destroy Earth just because? What do I do then? His father eyed him seriously for a moment. And then, his eyes opened in surprise. You are afraid, he concluded, as if amazed by the concept. Clark laughed even more, almost hysterically. Of course I'm afraid. He pretty much yelled. There is a general orbiting Earth right now threatening my home. My mother, my friends. They are all at risk here, and you are surprised that I'm afraid. Apparently he was surprised because he didn't answer immediately. I am sorry, Cal. I didn't consider your feelings about this. He approached and looked at his son in the eyes. Let me tell you this, however. You do not have to fear anything. You are my son, a member of the House of El, and you are more powerful than you can even imagine. When you realize this, you'll see that you don't need to be afraid of anything ever again. Clark was so surprised by that answer that he didn't say anything back. Follow me. I have a gift for you, said his father, starting to walk. Numbly, he followed him to another room, where there was a small floating robot. This is Kelex, Jor-El said, gesturing to the robot. Back in Krypton, Kelex was the service robot of the House of El. I uploaded her memories to the command key that I gave you, but only now I thought of giving her a body again. It is a pleasure to see you grown up, sir, Kelex said, proving her designation with a woman's voice. The pleasure is mine, he answered, almost by reflex. Jor-El looked at him. Raise your left arm, please. He did so, but almost jumped back when Kelex disintegrated into millions of little metal particles, only to reassemble herself around his arm, taking the form of a gray watch. That's incredible, he exclaimed, forgetting his problems for a second. I'm glad you think so, sir, answered Kelex, the voice vibrating his watch. Clark gave a little laugh and looked at his father, who was smiling at him. Jor-El got close and raised his arms. If he could, Clark was sure he would have been touching his shoulders. He looked deep into his eyes. Son, I am proud of the man you have become. Lara would be too, and my only regret is that Zod's coup robbed us the time it would take to load her memories and personality as well. He paused, still looking at Clark without blinking. Whatever you choose to do, go to Zod or not, you will have my full support. But I want you to know that if you choose to go, you won't be alone. Kelex and myself will be there with you the whole time. He could almost feel his father's hands on his shoulders, his words filling him with warmth. I want you to remember, always, don't be afraid. You are now the head of the House of El, and the symbol of the House of El means hope. Never forget this. Clark sat at the church's bench, appreciating for a second the emptiness of the place. It was a beautiful church, full of statues and religious decorations, a big crucifix on the altar at the end. The morning sun didn't enter the place, so the lighting was provided by the lit candles and the weak lights on the ceiling. He was never religious, but the possibility of some peace and quiet was too much to pass right now. Clark needed somewhere to sit down and sort out his thoughts, and that little church on Hell's Kitchen seemed like a good place for that. After talking with Jor-El, Clark went to Smallville. As much as he trusted his biological father's advice, he wanted to hear what his mother had to say. Apparently, great minds did think alike, because she told him something very close to what Jor-El said, to trust himself, and that whatever decision he made, she would support it. It made him happy to know they would stand with him no matter what, but it didn't help him decide what to do in the least. Should he just go to Zod? Was that a good idea? Or should he try to talk with humanity, meaning Natasha Romanoff and S.H.I.E.L.D., and try something else, another plan? Was that a good idea? You look troubled, son. Surprised, Clark looked up. He was deeper in his thoughts than he imagined, to let someone get so close without listening to them. It was a priest, an older man with gray short hair, dressed in black clothes. I'm Father Lantom, he introduced himself with a deep voice, sitting on a bench opposite to his. Clark, he said, nodding. He didn't say anything for a while, looking at the altar. I'm surprised the church is this empty today, he noted. Usually it's the first place people run to when there is a problem. Clark smiled. Only when there is a problem? He asked. Well, you know how it is, there are no atheists on a falling plane. Father Lantom smiled. He chuckled. I think the people of Hell's Kitchen are just more scared about aliens than others, Clark said. But they are probably praying from home. I hope so, the priest said. I'm afraid we are going to need all the help we can get if this turns ugly like last time. Father Lantom closed his eyes for a moment, as if praying too in silence. Clark didn't interrupt, he just kept pondering about what he would do. So, began the priest, opening his eyes and looking at him again. What ails you, son? Would you like to talk about it? Clark looked at the priest. I'm not religious, Father. But I am. And my religion compels me to aid anyone who needs it. So I ask again, what ails you, son? Clark sighed, looking down for a moment, deciding. Then he turned to the priest again. That ship that appeared last night? He began. I'm the one they are looking for. Whatever Father Lantom was expecting, it obviously hadn't been this. His eyes widened and his eyebrows shot up. Clark smiled sadly. He shouldn't have said anything. Do you know why they want you? Asked Father Lantom after a few seconds. He shook his head. No, but it's probably nothing good, he answered, looking at him. But if there is a chance that I can prevent a war by turning myself in, even if it's just a chance, shouldn't I take it? Father Lantom watched him without saying anything. What does your gut tell you? He asked finally. That Zod can't be trusted, Clark answered fast. That he won't keep his promise. He stopped and looked down, sighing. But I'm not sure the people of Earth can be either. No answer came from Father Lantom, even after a minute. Clark smiled sadly and got up, turning to the exit. Have you ever heard about the crucifixion of Jesus? Father Lantom asked before he could get out. Clark stopped, turning back to the priest again. Of course. Let me tell you what I think about this story, he said, getting up with a groan and approaching Clark. Now, you may not be religious, but you most likely heard about the story of Jesus. Him being the Son of God and all that. Clark confirmed with a nod. Good. That should save us some time. He stopped for a moment, gathering his words. Most people think that Jesus was a paragon of goodness, the greatest example to follow, a man that never doubted himself and his mission and his faith. He looked at Clark. In my opinion, they are wrong. I do think that he really is the greatest example to follow and a paragon of goodness too, but not because he never doubted, but because he did. Father Lantom leaned over a bench. You see, the Bible tells that Jesus gathered apostles to spread his teachings. It was the great plan of God, written down since before he was born. And one of those apostles was named Judas, a name that you probably know too. The traitor, Clark said. Yes. But the thing is, Jesus always knew Judas would betray him. As I said, it was already bound to happen. He knew that even as they sat together to have a last meal. He knew that before he even chose Judas as a disciple. So the question is, knowing this, why did he keep Judas as an apostle if he knew he would condemn him to unimaginable suffering and death? Clark didn't have an answer. Why? He asked. The Bible doesn't say, Father Lantom answered to Clark's incredulity. But I have a theory, I think, and that is my personal opinion, that Jesus did that to give him a chance to not betray him. But he did betray him anyway, Clark retorted after a second. And Jesus died horribly because of it. Well, yes, but Jesus gave him every chance to not do that. Clark opened his arms, confused. Father Lantom sighed. You are looking at it the wrong way. You are looking at it from Judas's point of view. Judas was always going to betray him. It was already written. God knew, Jesus knew. And yet, to try to save him, Jesus still gave him a chance. He looked at Clark. Even knowing he would be tortured, even knowing he would die, Jesus chose to give Judas a chance. It was a leap of faith, a tiny bit of hope that maybe, just maybe, he would redeem himself. The symbol of the house of El means hope. Embodied within that hope is the fundamental belief in the potential of every person to be a force for good. That's what you can bring them. Hope, Clark whispered, the words his father said to him crossing his thoughts. Yes, hope, agreed Father Lantom. Judas, sadly, didn't prove himself to be the man Jesus knew he could be. To Judas, in the end, it made no difference. But to Jesus, it made all the difference in the world. He gave him a chance. That's the important thing. Clark didn't say anything for a long minute, thinking about what Father Lantom said. Then he looked at the priest and nodded. "Thank you." And he turned to leave, a decision already forming in his mind. When he reached the door, however, Father Lantom's voice echoed in the church. "That said, Jesus also knew he would rise again on the third day," he mentioned as Clark looked back. "So, if you are not able to do that, and if you are sure that this general is a bad guy, might I point you to yet another story, more of a mythological one? Have you ever heard of the story of the Trojan horse?" Natasha looked around, studying the layout of the helicarrier. SHIELD agents were running around, moving weapons, searching for information, preparing the Quinjets and the helicopters to be launched. Stark was making last-minute improvements to his suit, probably trying to shield Jarvis from another cyber attack. Captain Rogers was looking outside, more than likely forming strategies on his very military brain. Banner was sitting down, introspective, as if controlling himself and, more importantly, the big guy. And Clint, as always, had located a high nest, so he could observe everything from afar. All in all, it reminded her very much of when Loki appeared, they all together inside a helicarrier, getting ready to fight an alien threat. Because she did think it would come to a fight. No one with peaceful intentions threatened an entire world and simply left after that. "Romanoff." Fury's voice made itself heard. She turned to see him and Maria Hill approaching. "Where is he?"
Clark Kent. Kal-El.
The man both the world and General Zod were looking for. Natasha, however, knew that looking for him was a waste of time. The only places she could find him were his mother's home and his apartment in Hell's Kitchen, and he would only be there to be found if he wanted to. There was also the small fact that they couldn't take him by force even they tried. Luckily, she didn't think they would have to try. By what she saw of him, he would show up rather than let this man threaten the world. "He will show up, sir," she said simply. Fury sighed, irritated. "Romanoff, did you even talk to him?" he asked. "No." And before he or Hill could interrupt, she added, "But there is no need to. He will come, don't worry." "I am worried." But before he could finish what he was about to say, an alarm began to sound. Agents and soldiers began to run, rifles prepared. The Avengers got up, running there as well. Without waiting for Fury, she also got up, going to the outside of the helicarrier, running through the gigantic cannons and turrets that were aiming at something in the sky. And that's when she looked up and saw him, floating in the air, a long red cape swaying with the wind. Clark Kent looked down, clad on a form-fitting blue suit with a red S on the chest. He completely ignored the soldiers and the helicarrier weapons aiming at him, as if they weren't any threat, and then said very calmly, "I would like to speak to Natasha Romanoff."
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going. Plus, it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.